diverse set of behaviours.
Pere Māori, aho.
Your single source of truth.
The words don't pull it to me.
My husband is Samoan, so talofa.
Ngā tikanga reo kikitahi.
Che Guevara of New Zealand's Parliament, Chloe Slaughter.
Penny houses.
And it's communist.
He whaka tūpuna.
They've got mata, running holidays.
Kia ora tātou, nau mai, hara mai. Welcome to another episode of The All Report. My name's Pere Samah, and I'm joined by my co-host, Samah Samah.
Kia ora tātou.
How you doing, Samah? How you feeling?
I'm doing really good, actually. Yep, had a restful couple of days. Saw my family recently, feeling refreshed and ready to decolonize. What about you?
I'm excited because we're going to do something slightly different today, right? You're looking a little bit
Why is
higher
that?
than me, though, eh? We're going to have to change that. Bear with me. But I'm excited today because we're just trying something slightly a little bit different. We're going to look at the news headlines live, just to see if there's anything that we want to respond to off the bat. Otherwise, what are we talking about tonight? We're going to be doing our usual of defending our left bloc parties, which doesn't include the Labour Party. We're going to be talking about actually Samah's interview on the BHN Leftist Collective, or it might be the Doc Studios Leftist Collective. I think BHN is their news report, and that the Leftist Collective is something slightly different. But of course, we're going to be talking about this hit job, this ridiculous defamatory hit job on Benjamin Doyle. It's just outrageous, and it's as you predicted, these baseless attacks against the Greens and also Te Pāti Māori are just going to ramp up. We're going to be talking about the Privileges Committee that Te Pāti Māori decided to skip so that they can run their own. I'm going to be talking about the Treaty Principles Bill, and now we have the final count of the for and against, and we're thinking probably what we're going to see is it come up. Well, we're thinking that that's what's going to come up in the headlines.
Yeah, we're hoping it's the main story on tonight's news so we can watch it, have a bit of a chat, and then move on and turn the news off. Otherwise, we might just turn it off.
Yeah, if there's nothing interesting, then we'll just move on. But yeah, maybe what else are they going to talk about? USA tariffs? Maybe.
Yeah, that will definitely make it on there.
We'll see.
Looks like we're about to go live on the news, so...
Yeah, we're ready. Again, just welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us for another
Tātou.
Friday evening. Okay, here we go.
Tonight on One News, global stock markets in turmoil as countries vow to hit back at Donald Trump's tariffs. What it means for Kiwi exporters. A damning report finds human error to blame for the Manuanui sinking. Multiple failures revealed in the crew and the wider Navy, lacking the right skills, experience and readiness to do the job. And how to get extremely skinny and gory photos. Would you let your kids read these books? The Worst Children's Library, exposing the easy online access to off-limit topics.
Okay, it's not talking about the Treaty Principles Bill. So,
Why is it not talking about the Treaty Principles Bill? Why?
Yeah, straight up.
Oh, man.
Should be the top news story. Maybe we can check back in later because they might bring it on, but the fact that it's not the top news story for such a consequential bill, for the biggest turnout in any submissions history, for it being such a damning result on the soon-to-be Deputy Prime Minister of this country, and just how infinitely embarrassing it is for David Seymour. Well, I guess I've just answered myself, didn't I?
Yeah, but I was definitely hoping to see something. Maybe they'll throw it in as a little story, but yeah, so I guess we'll just get straight into it, eh?
Come on.
Let's get into...
the real news?
Well, maybe should we keep it there? I'm going to get rid of it. All right. So, Benjamin Doyle. I thought that this was a really awesome video that Ash Reborn put out. I'm not sure if Ash Reborn is on TikTok as well, but we found this video of them on Facebook talking about the sources, or where these allegations and conspiracies and all of these things have been coming from. Without any further ado, we'll just play the video, then we can have a yarn.
Who exactly are the sources of Winston Peters in regards to the Benjamin Doyle scandal?
Where did you get the information from?
I got it from a number of sources.
You don't want to be specific?
And
As a long-time media person, please don't ask me.
Since Uncle Winnie has refused to reveal his sources, and I see that an OIA request has been put through to his office for these sources, I thought we'd take a look at where all this originated. To do that, we will need to go all the way back to November 2024 to a post on Twitter by an account by the name of Holy Heka Tui Teka. In this post, the account brings up Benjamin Doyle's maiden speech and suggests there are disturbing posts on an already deleted Instagram account. Note that apparently the account was already deleted. Chantel Baker was quick to jump on the post requesting any of the deleted.
Oh man, Chantel Baker coming out. And I just want to say, so the posts were already deleted by the time that Benjamin did their maiden speech.
Yes.
And, what I've heard is that the posts were deleted once Benjamin understood that there was a really good chance that they were going to get into Parliament.
Mm-hmm.
And that was after, the Greens lost 4 MPs, like James Shaw, Darlene Tana, Golriz Garaman, and then Efeso as well.
And Kitty Kitty.
Yeah, but I think that was before.
Oh, right.
I think that was in a previous term or whatever. But,
Okay.
so he's quite far down the list. And,
They.
they were quite far down the list. And it reminds me of myself when I tried to be a list MP for Te Pāti Māori. There was no way that I thought that I was going to get in. I didn't go and adjust all of my things that I have online. And I don't think I have anything that strange online, but there are probably some things that I would put on private if I were to get into Parliament. And I think for them, being so far down on the list, it's not a surprise that maybe they didn't think to change some of those things, because it was just it's quite a far-fetched chance for them actually to land in Parliament. But here we are now.
Posts. Then there are streams of posts about Benjamin and what they're up to, and I assume there are conversations being had in the background. Gilda Kirkpatrick drops by in December 2024 to express her views. Now let's get
for those of you who don't know, Gilda Kirkpatrick is an alleged gold digger who married and then divorced with a rich lister, and now has connections with the National Party, with the ACT Party and New Zealand First, even so far as to host them at her mansion. And Pere says my buddy because she's always trying to come at me, and I just get so much pleasure from just completely ignoring her existence.
skip right forward to 28th of March this year, just 4 days ago. An account called Pride the Arrogant, also on Twitter, posted about Benjamin being on Parliament steps at what looks like to be a child-friendly event, but this account has of course claimed it to be grooming. This is when the account we met before, Holy Hekatui Tech,
assuming that, what was it, Pride Against something account was a homophobic account,
posted their expose on Benjamin. And that's how Annie O'Brien picked it up and started sharing it around on her Twitter.
Okay, it needs to be noted here that in that Holy Heka post that Annie O'Brien shared, they are basically insinuating that things like a photo of the parent kissing their child, Ben kissing their child, a completely normal exchange between a parent and a child, is somehow sinister. Just simply that photo's existence. And for me, I just find that extremely disturbing that they're looking at a very normal interaction between a parent and a child, and they're seeing something sexual in there. And a lot of the messages that they've been putting up are like sharing these very normal images of their child, which is highly inappropriate in the first place to share it in that way. As someone noted, if you were worried, you'd go to the police. But they just sat on it for like half a year to a year, doing absolutely nothing about it, and then timed it perfectly for Trans Visibility Day, and for when they needed the political points against the Green Party. But yeah, I just find it really disturbing that they're looking at normal images of a child and being like, whoa, look, he's posting an image of a child on his lap. Look at that image, it shows the child's crotch. I'm like, why are you looking at the child's crotch? Why are you thinking sexual things when you're looking at someone kissing their child? Like, my brain would never in a million years go there. I would never think that this is a sexual image simply because there was a full body image of a child which everyone posts all day, every day, or that a parent kissing their child is somehow strange. Like, I feel as though, at least for some of these people in the right wing, that at least they have some repressed dark fantasies that they're projecting on Benjamin Doyle. And that's part of the attack on queer people, is that the right wing actually has this festering issue. We know that it's an issue within fundamentalist Christian churches, and it's rife within these right wing communities. So it's only natural that they would try and project and put that onto someone. But yeah, just the association of sexuality with normal images of children, I just find really disturbing.
Killed it, yeah. And you know, you kind of covered it, right? But it relies on people's homophobia, right? Of just, like you touched on it with the Christianity stuff, like they frame homosexuality as a sin. And just that people who are practicing homosexuality are perverted. And all of this bullshit is just relying on people holding on to that.
Exactly.
So, you know, it's the same as, it's funny, you know, all of these attacks on the queer community, Takatapui community, it's almost as if like they got sick of just piling everything on Māori. And now there's this, I mean, the Takatapui community has always been under it, and I guess they pivot back and forth.
Yeah.
But it feels like more attacks are coming on the Takatapui community. Similarly, how Te Ao Māori was facing it, and yeah, it just all of these really normal things, nothing insidious about anything, but they're able to play on people's misconceptions, and yeah, it's just awful. The idea that because because they don't conform to the normal gender stereotypes, that there's somehow a pervert who, I mean, it's just wild. It's just wild. I won't get too ahead of myself, because we're probably going to bring up some of the stuff that I want to talk about. But
and yes, you know, someone is saying, do you support Doyle? And it's like, it's what you said. None of these conspiracies would stick if it was a straight man. So I'm not going to follow through with the logic that these seemingly normal posts, unless you do backflips and strange conspiratorial thinking, have anything insidious to do with them. I would never assume something so horrible of someone unless I had some really good evidence. So if someone presents some great evidence, if the police prosecutes, of course I'm not supportive of that. That would be outrageous. But we don't have any of that, and so we have to call out the dirty politics of this right-wing attack. So that's where we stand on the situation. I hope that's clear enough for anyone asking. Let's get back to our video of Ash.
Count, as well as making all sorts of outrageous and conspiratorial speculations right down to the location that was tagged.
Oh yeah, that was weird.
Which of course was then also shared by Chantel Baker on the very same day.
That one was so weird. They were like, if you type the location of this video, it comes close to a city called Cumming. Ooh, like honestly, the Q and non-ness of this attack and the fact that it was taken seriously by our media, it's a really bad sign. I ain't gonna lie.
Like, it's because there's no real evidence, right? So they have to pile on every little tiny thing, and then for those people who have those little niggles in their head who think that homosexuality or takatapuitanga is a perversion, you know, they just need that little bit extra to get them over that tipping point to then believe that, I mean, it's just wild. It's just crazy.
It is. Okay, let's finish this video.
Are we starting to see a common trend here of radical feminists who particularly don't like trans people? They don't like the data they've been given, so we just have to describe those. This wouldn't have anything to do with Pāti Parker, would it? Considering Benjamin actively opposed her entering the country? Maybe that's why she was quick to jump on board when sharing Chantel's post. Then the centrist, then Winnie, then Cam Slater, and everybody else started exploding with this political propaganda everywhere. Sharing images of children, might I add, to the darkest corners of the internet.
This point is great.
Always screaming, protect the children, protect the children! And I have not seen one single person go out of their way to verify what they're saying. I've not seen them go out of their way to protect the children in the post, and I've not seen any of them post a police report number letting us know how seriously they're taking this matter. Because none of them actually give a shit. They're too busy sharing photos of children and saying inappropriate things about them to feed their agenda against the rainbow community. Protect the children! Protect the children! Absolutely disgusting and appalling behavior. The only plus that I can see here is that it opens all of these people up to claims of defamation and harmful digital communications. And these rich right-wing propagandists better come hard with facts or they may end up just bankrolling the Green Party. So there you have it, ladies and gents. Our Deputy Prime Minister gets his information from unverified sources on Twitter. These individuals couldn't get the media to run any sort of reports on it, but somehow they managed to get the Deputy Prime Minister of the nation to run it. What the is going on here?
Don't know what this screenshot is in reference to. Maybe someone in the comments can illuminate the purpose of Ash adding this in.
Yeah, but great video, Ash. Well done. If you're on Facebook, share this video, peeps. I reckon it's very good, very good.
Kapai. So, what did all of these right-wing lobbyist attacks culminate in? They culminated on a 6 p.m. Headline news story on Trans Visibility Day. On Trans Visibility Day, they made an attack on the trans and queer community to try and make them invisible, to try and invisibilize the queer community. And that's why I have referred to this as a fascistic. Well, no, actually, I referred to the attacks on Tamitha Paul as fascistic because they're trying to erase certain ideas and thoughts from the conversation. And this is likewise fascistic because they're trying to erase the existence of queer people from our society. Because a lot of the attacks mixed in just random queer terminology, random sort of queer forms of expression that those of us who have been around the queer community know that it's the context and what it means and how it's been and how it's used in like a fun and light way and to describe people's like personalities and self-expression and so on. So I wanted to bring in the coverage of it from the Socialist website. Because I think they did a really good wee summary explaining the way that, you know, they use racism, transphobia, and division in general to distract and to scapegoat from the way that they're destroying and selling out our country. So I'll just read from it. The unhinged and hysterical claims, which have been repeated by sections of the corporate media, point to the rapid lurch to the right by the political establishment. Like the Trump administration in the US, the national-led coalition government, in which New Zealand First plays a major role, is whipping up racism and backwardness in order to divert attention from soaring social inequality, brutal austerity measures, and the integration of New Zealand into the US-led war preparations against China. These are all important topics that should be headlining the news every night, right? But, you know, they manufacture this moral panic to distract people so that they can get away with not talking about the important issues. Towards the end of March, Doyle came under attack by various far-right hacks, including anti-transgender activist Annie O'Brien, who was a digital director for former National Party leader Judith Collins, and Chantal Baker, who helped to lead the anti-vaccination protests. These and other individuals shared innocuous photos from Doyle's private Instagram account, including one of MP kissing their own child, and made lurid and defamatory statements. In a typical post, Baker said, "Are the NZ police investigating the very concerning images? This man has been involving incredibly young children." This man has been posting involving incredibly young children. She asked in a swipe at the gender diverse community. Of course, Doyle identifies as non-binary. And this was a really common theme with the attacks on Doyle, as they brought in their queer identity. They brought in the fact that they were advocates for the queer community, for puberty blockers and so on. Obviously, like, we have no issue with people having those debates, but to frame it in the context of that someone is a pedophile simply because they advocate those claims, That's super harmful and is a direct attack on our queer community. They go on, Peters amplified these baseless innuendos in a social media post, which demanded that the Green Party answer serious questions about Doyle's Instagram account, including the meaning of the account name Bible Belt Bussy, which is a slang term used to denote the male anus, according to Wikipedia. Peters also asked Doyle why they deleted several photos from their account, implying this somehow was suspicious. Okay, so that was the background of it all. Annie O'Brien, who's from this transphobic group, Speak Up for Women, and has connections with the National Party and the Free Speech Union, which we know is basically just an extension of the ACT Party. So she's got these connections with ACT and National, but also people who have connections with New Zealand First. They blew this up. It made it to 6 p.m. news. And that's where we're at, folks. We can have, these just any outrageous conspiracy theorist will get platformed by someone like Winston Peters, and then all of a sudden the media feel like it's justified to make it a news story.
Yeah, it's just, you sling enough mud, some of it will stick, and because it's a minority group, of course, there's going to be people who are happy to amplify it. But yeah, I mean, this has nothing to do with what they're saying. They're simply against the groups that Benjamin is advocating for. Like, it's insane. Like, and what you said before, that Annie O'Brien has links with National, etc., etc. But in this recent article that she's just put out, trying to say that she's like part of the community, right? She talks about how she actually has primarily voted for the Green Party. But of course, her most recent political connection is working under Judith Collins. And, in this article here, this is the one I'm talking about. She tries to act as if she's one of the crew, right? She mentions how she's a lesbian, to say that she's part of the queer community. But I mean, like we saw in Ash's video, even if you are a lesbian or a part of the queer community, it doesn't necessarily mean the same as a trans person. There are these really radical, like, what would you call them? Radical feminists.
What, the TERFs?
Yeah. What is a TERF?
A TERF is a trans exclusionary radical feminist.
Yeah.
And they can't use radical they're not feminists. They're just, by definition, you're not a feminist if you're not caring about the full spectrum of genders.
So they've got their ideology. They've got their ideological differences with Benjamin. And like you said, we can have this discussion and have the argument, but framing it in the way that they are, it's just insane. And, just to acknowledge the whānau, Benjamin's whānau, and his tamariki, and their tamariki, sorry. Still practicing that one, eh? It's a hard thing for all of us, eh? But it's all good. It's all good. Just a mihi to the whānau. What a time. I would be very sad if Benjamin leaves politics because of something like this. And you can understand why you might, his whānau is essentially being targeted,
There.
Oh
my
so
goodness,
hard.
stop talking.
I'll just stop.
It irks back to, someone was talking about this. Winston Peters worked really closely with Muldoon, and Muldoon attacked a Labour Party MP and accused them of being prosecuted by the police for homosexual activities. Back then, homosexuality was illegal. This is in the 70s. Winston Peters is ancient. And this ended up actually driving this MP out of Parliament. Labour, as usual, caved and asked them to leave. And it was a completely baseless accusation. And Winston Peters worked really closely with Muldoon. Even after Muldoon's demise, Winston Peters maintained a close relationship. So he learned from that level of bigotry. And not only that, Winston Peters actually voted against both decriminalizing homosexuality and gay marriage. So he's just clearly an old raging homophobe. It's very obvious that this is an attack on the queer community. And it's coming from people who consistently attack trans and queer people. And they're using Annie O'Brien, who's lesbian, in the same way that they use racist Maori MPs to attack the Maori community. They always play identity politics, right? And use someone's identity to justify their bigoted decisions. This always happens, but we know that Annie O'Brien is bigoted and transphobic. Doesn't matter that she's lesbian. That literally makes zero difference to how horrific a person that she is and how bigoted that she is.
Come on, maybe that's a good time for us
What
to
clearly is an issue, not
sorry to make everyone watch stuff from the platform, and I'm sorry to give them a view, right? But I thought it was really just interesting. Sean pulls up Winston, asking him like, okay,
if you'd like to know how to become a ClickBank super affiliate,
what are your actual allegations? Is what Sean wants to get out of Winston. And, you know, Winston is clever, right? He doesn't want to be done for defamation. He just wants to stir the pot, you know? But, you know, he's brought up all of these concerns and saying that the police need to get involved. Like, he's really concerned. But then let's just listen to what Winston says his motivations are, what his concerns are, what his allegations are.
I want to be clear, what precisely are your allegations against Mr. Doyle?
My allegations are, Mr. Doyle, you have been screaming out for young children to be allowed to access the puberty blockers and sexual choice operations when at some time in the future, because of their innocence, they're most likely going to sue society for the adults not looking after them when they were in their youth and unable to make the right decision. It's not too complicated.
So that's enough, right? It's, you know, nothing about the social media posts that have come out, nothing about it at all. It's just an ideological thing. This is something that New Zealand First has been campaigning on. A lot of their constituents, you know, like Destiny's Church voters make up the New Zealand First voter bloc. And so that's what it's all about. And he's taken this opportunity to sling some mud and to fake concern when really all of these people who are bringing up these issues are making everything worse and making everything unsafe.
Yeah, and just on that, the socialist, what are they called? World Socialist website mentions that in that same interview, because it's in the extended interview on the platform, which I can't be bothered watching the whole interview, but they say that in that interview, Plunkett repeated extreme right-wing conspiracies attacking the Burnett Foundation, formerly the AIDS Foundation, where Doyle worked before entering Parliament. He said that the state-funded sexual health organization was involved in very questionable sex education in schools, to which Peters replied, "You're right about the AIDS Foundation," saying it was pushing a certain type of behavior which only invites more AIDS. That's a clear attack on the queer community. That's clearly homophobic. It's such old school homophobia. And, you know, I think, you know, even one of the reporters pointed out to Luxon that in Peter's tweets, he actually misgendered Benjamin Doyle. And that's, again, and also indicative of the fact that Winston Peters is just a transphobic, old school homophobe. He's shown it with his voting history. He's shown it with his words. It's, you know, just the most obvious thing in the world. But our news media aren't linking all of these facts together or bringing up the fact that he's got all this history or that he's saying this outwardly homophobic shit, you know? Okay, so...
Where to next?
Oh,
there are so many points that I'd like us to clarify. Okay, so this one. Look at this Annie O'Brien tweet here. She goes into explain kind of the main pictures in question, and we don't want to show the pictures. They're fine. They're totally innocent pictures. Like, you showed me all of them before and flicked through them. It's like, oh, this is like a beautiful family album, like just shots of the beautiful whānau. If you want to see the pictures, they're all out there. We just didn't want to put them on our video in case the family isn't into it being absolutely everywhere. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with these images. Anyway, so Annie O'Brien, she's persisted with this idea that the photos have been captioned with bussy galore. But the main point that she's not saying is that the bussy galore phrase was not attached to a specific photo. It was a part of a carousel of photos. So like an album of photos. And my understanding is that Bussy is Benjamin's nickname. And
because
so
it's their name on Instagram,
Yeah.
Bible Belt Bussy. So they're referring to themselves.
makes sense.
They're saying Bussy galore, as in there's a galore of images of me in this thread. And one of the images happens to have their child in it. And Annie O'Brien and these right-wing creeps are trying to draw the connection that that caption was specifically about that one photo deep in the carousel.
Yeah. And, you know, there's nothing sexual about it. But then you have these people like Annie O'Brien who say they're concerned for, you know, what about the children? And it's just now Annie and other people are resharing those images, putting them out everywhere into the darkest corners of the web, using this sexual language, you know, actually saying sex and anus and da-da-da-da-da-da, using all of these real trigger word type words. And so it's just so clear to me that they're really, and here we go as well from the article.
The Herald, like, for some reason, are publishing Annie O'Brien's reckons.
Yeah. So this is a article that Annie wrote for the Herald or whatever, where she's defending her reasoning. And here she says, for those who have managed to avoid the rapid education in sexual slang over the past few days, Bussy is a portmanteau, a combination of the words boy and pussy. I have seen some reports that it means male and pussy, but that would be mussy. And given the context, less egregious. So she's saying that no. He is referring to boy pussy. He is referring to the boy. He is explicitly targeting his comments at the boy.
Because she specifically says the given context. Yeah.
So,
and the thing is that
like, hang on, sorry. It's because it's just like, there are a whole bunch of allegations coming out from everywhere. Some people are like, oh, is it slightly inappropriate language? And oh, maybe just a slightly bit of inappropriate language. But she is explicitly here making the claim that it's not just some unfortunate language that's just landed there mistakenly. She's saying that Benjamin Doyle is specifically highlighting children.
Yeah, and they
in
did
a pornographic way.
Mm-hmm.
That's a defamatory claim right here.
And I hope they get done for defamation. And that's what everyone's saying in their tweets. Like they're not mentioning that there was a number of photos. They're posting a picture of a photo and saying this photo was captioned with this. And if you read that without knowing the context, like I feel like that might concern you. Why would they say bussy galore about a photo of a child? But that's just simply not not what happened. And it is a bold-faced lie, which actually Annie repeats in this very article. So, you know, I don't know if anyone wants to hit the New Zealand Herald up for misinformation or whatever the going word is these days. But she says the Green MP also captioned at least 2 photos of a child with the words bussy galore and captioned another photo reportedly of Doyle with swipe right to see an eggplant emoji. I mean, that second one is simply of Doyle. I don't know why Doyle can't sexualize themselves. And that first accusation is simply false. They did not caption photos with bussy, of children with bussy galore. They were always part of a combination of photos. So this is a lie to me. And so one thing I wanted to point out as well is that this tactic of attacking the trans and queer community on important days, like this time attacking Benjamin Doyle on One News at 6 p.m. as a headline attack on Trans Day of Visibility, this has actually happened before. With the very same people, Annie O'Brien and David Seymour cook up this attack on the trans community in 2020 and try their best to stage a transphobic event in Parliament on Trans Awareness Week.
It looks like we might be getting joined by some haters in the comment section soon. I just want to remind people, guys, gals, and everyone in between, just keep it respectful. You know, I'm trying to keep up with some of the comments that are happening here. Oh, you don't have to block anyone. Oh,
Well, they were like, their name was the Anglo-Saxon.
That's all right. I mean,
isn't that just straight up white supremacists? I mean,
the I mean, what's an Anglo-Saxon?
Like a white person. But it's just a common thing that white supremacists. I guess you can bring them back. I don't know how now.
You have a little kōrero, and I'll see if I'm able to unblock the poor fella.
I don't know why you're being sensitive.
I don't think they'd said anything offensive or anything like that. Anyway,
so this isn't new. In 2020, they tried to do this, and it was they tried to organize this transphobic event during Trans Awareness Week, during the first day of Trans Awareness Week. And then we're gonna need you to play the video.
Oh, Cowboy, sorry.
I think it's designed to wind us up. The event was originally scheduled to be today, which is the start of Trans Awareness Week. And Trans Awareness Week is important because it's a week leading up to Trans Day of Remembrance, which is when we remember our dead. So, sorry.
No, I'm sorry.
It's okay. They know.
This is just how scummy these people are. They specifically, she goes on to say, they know what they're doing. Absolutely, they know what they're doing. And I would love to see an explanation from One News of why they sat on this information, apparently for months, because these right-wing lobbyists passed it on to the news and decided to air it on Trans Visibility Day. They can say it's because Winston Peters specifically made a post, you know, days before then, and they felt they were justified. But it seems highly suspicious that of all the days in the year, they posted a transphobic story as a headline story on One News on Trans Visibility Day. And people got in touch with us and told us that they had emailed alternative stories for that day, positive stories about the trans community. But these weren't included. They decided specifically to include this transphobic story. And I just find that extremely sickening and also kind of confusing, because I feel like for a wee while there, it seemed like the media was taking transphobia seriously. And, you know, saying that the attacks on, you know, they were seemingly taking the attacks on the trans community seriously. And now all of a sudden they're normalizing attacks on the trans community. They're highlighting conspiracy theories about the trans community on Trans Visibility Day from well-known transphobic actors such as Annie O'Brien, who has consistently attacked the trans community, not only the trans community, also sex workers, and just, you know, platforming horrific people like Pāti Parker, and working with the Free Speech Union that's just objectively racist and trash. You could go on. And for some reason, they take these people seriously and platform them all the time.
I was just trying to figure out how to unban this Anglo-Saxon character.
How'd you go?
But I couldn't find out how to unban. So if someone wants to like find out and tell me, then I can do that. But otherwise, we'll just crack on.
Kapai. All right, so One News, they did that attack on Trans Visibility Day, and then the next day they did another story about it, just more conspiratorial stuff about photos that were just of Doyle and just the sexualized language they're using about themselves. And one interesting part, and you know, just highlights how bad faith these attacks are the way that they highlighted this just random anecdotal email that they received from one individual person who is of no significance whatsoever. We're not told why they've been positioned as someone who's included on our government-funded news. And they included and read out their email, which just happened to perfectly align with what Mr. Peters was saying and the attacks on the anti-Greens.
They've roped in the rainbow community, and I'm telling you 9 to 1, the rainbow community is as mad about this as we are.
Hold on. 9 to 1, the
9 to
gay
1.
community agrees with Winston Peters. That's what he's saying.
It's classic, like, you know, they pretend that majority of Māori voting for them. Well, you know, it's just so gaslighty, ridiculous bullshit. And you know, it's what we hear into Pāti Māori a lot. I say we. I'm not into Pāti Māori, but it's what we Māori hear all the time. We'll have an opinion, and then they'll accuse us of saying that we're trying to represent the views of all Māori. You know, and so I feel like he's now trying to accuse the Greens of them saying that they represent the entire queer community, but I'm pretty sure they represent the majority. Like, it's kind of believable-ish against Te Pāti Māori because they receive such a small percentage of the party vote, but the Greens actually receive like a solid chunk, and their history in that space of advocating in the queer community is just so outrageous claim from Winston.
Right. And what I wanted to say is that, like, you remember when Tamitha Paul just said some of her constituents feel unsafe about police, an objectively true statement. One News went around asking a whole bunch of middle-aged white people if they felt unsafe around the police in an attempt to disprove what she's saying. Well, how come One News is not going around and asking the queer community about their views on this and just taking Winston's word for it? For some reason, when the right wing makes objectively outrageous, unbacked, unevidenced statements, they get away with it and the news accepts it as gospel. Not only that, but they hunt for any anecdotal evidence that might back them up. Let's keep watching.
Into an email sent to Chloe Swarbrick from a gay woman in her 50s in a civil union who watched this exchange on last night's news.
Yeah, the context is that members of the rainbow community oftentimes use terminology which could be considered to be outrageous.
The woman who One News spoke with today wrote that she resents Chloe Swarbrick's statement, saying being gay is not an excuse to behave inappropriately or make inappropriate comments, adding, "Be consistent, Chloe, and how dare you tar all gay people and by connection their children and their families with an outrageous brush."
So they've managed to find this email which justifies or backs up what they're saying, but they've excluded statements from groups like Rainbow Youth, who actually speak on behalf of numerous queer people, who speak on behalf of the queer community, or at least a big part of the queer community. They've excluded other voices from the queer community, other individual voices. They've excluded expert voices, activists in this space. And they've just included a random email. And for me, it just perfectly encapsulates how this is a hit job. Because whenever do they do that? Whenever do they say, and here's a random email, evidence, it's just blatantly not how you do journalism.
Outrageous.
Okay, but yeah, these attacks by the media, they were just, honestly, they were outrageous. And they just came left, right, and center. I didn't bring them all here, but just a couple of examples. Has the Green Party lost its way? Lloyd Burr, a renowned Greenie? It's always these people who support National and ACT and New Zealand First who are like, oh no, the Greens have lost their way.
And he accuses the Greens of being off track, and he references their an earlier campaign that they've run, and he's trying to convince us that they need to go back to their earlier style of campaigning. But you know, the Greens in the last election got the biggest voter turnout that they've ever had. The Greens are more popular than they've ever been. And I know Kai Matara, you just said that there was that 11% poll. But at the last election, what were they? 14 something. They were at the last election, the highest that they've ever done. And their trajectory has stayed pretty much the same. I think now they're probably going a bit harder, a bit more radical in the way that we want them to. But they were already advocating for the Takatapui community, of course. They were already advocating strongly around foreign policy stuff. Like back in the day, West Papua was a big kaupapa for the Greens. Now it's more Palestine, and of course we still hear them advocate for West Papua and other countries like that. But I don't see how they've changed. I don't see how they've shifted. I think in general, it is really difficult to get environmental issues on the table. We saw it in the last political term. Climate change was a big thing. And climate change is kind of the only thing that people are willing to entertain, because from a business perspective, it's not that hard to work on climate type initiatives.
It may even be profitable.
Yeah, exactly. The way that we are responding to climate change, I'm not a climate change denier, right? Like, it's pretty obvious the greenhouse gases that we are creating is being trapped in our atmosphere and is stopping heat from radiating back out into space. Like, that's usually how we cool. The sun hits us with the heat and it bounces, it radiates back out. But the greenhouse gases creates a greenhouse and it traps the heat in here. Anyway, it's all simple stuff. But it's really difficult to talk about environmental issues, I feel, because it all ends up going back to climate. And we've kind of gotten stuck in that hole of viewing all environmental issues through the climate lens. And I think via, green capitalism and like Nestle advocating for, regenerative agriculture and stuff like that. It's in that space of the big green capitalist industry now. So anyway, I disagree. I think they've always been on the current trajectory that they're on. And yeah. Jump in a lake, Lloyd. The Willie Jackson reference.
Very obscure reference.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
on someone comments, Stephen Rainbow was one of the original blue greens, and we all know how that turned out. And that's a good point about blue greens and the people who push for a blue greens party. Blue greens are not effective in decolonizing or tackling capitalism or any important issue of our time. And it reminds me of so Helen Clark's husband, Peter something, he made a tweet and he was saying that the Green Party's lost its way, and he was basically saying that the Green Party of Germany is a better model because they're more practical and they have managed to remain in government. While the Green Party of Germany has also supported genocide, brother. So it goes to show that if you compromise on your values, you become an ineffective party. You become a party whose views are inconsistent when it comes to various things. And I think that the attacks on the Greens are coming from the fact that they are actually trying to be consistent in their values. And they find that really scary. They find it terrifying that the Greens have a really clear, or seemingly, the way that they're going, a clear moral compass. They have a clear stance on Palestine, on the environment, on capitalism, which they explicitly talk about, by the way. And I've loved that for them. And I just find it hilarious that Helen Clark, a hypercentrist who brought us closer to NATO, but is now complaining about our government's response to Israel, that her husband is saying that the Greens have lost their way and they should be more like the genocidal Greens in Germany. All right, so...
Yeah, I mean, lots of people have tried the blue-greens approach. There are a lot of people, like, kind of top, we're kind of in that realm of blue-greens. There's also, I forget the name, but there have been lots of attempts to start a blue-green style party. But it's so problematic. Everything the Greens talks about, it all flows into each other. And, that blue aspect of the Greens, they would love James Shaw, and all of this carbon credits, offsetting your mess. Those are the things that the blue Greens love.
Yeah.
And it's so superficial. and it's so like surface level. And what are their stances on te tiriti? It's usually awful. What are their stances on foreign policy? It's usually awful. What are their stances on advocating for our vulnerable communities? It's usually awful. Like, the two worlds, they need to connect and meet somehow, but the core demographics, they just don't work out. They don't align. And that's why we see lots of attempts of blue-green parties to try and make something happen. But they always fail. They never get above the 5% to actually make it in. And I think it's because you're inherently trying to put two groups together who just
diametrically opposed to each other.
Yeah, exactly.
So Madeline Chaplin, who often has incorrect takes, was one of those, shows that even those, so-called leftist commentators also victim blamed the Green Party and Benjamin Doyle. And in this article, she was like, the Greens should have seen it coming. They should have protected Benjamin Doyle. But like, he deleted those posts. They deleted those posts before they became an MP.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what did
What's
they
the
possibly want the Greens to do?
Yeah.
If you're going to say, oh, they should have told Benjamin to just outright delete that Instagram page purely because it's titled Bible Belt Pussy, that's when it just gets way too far. You cannot allow the right wing to take up that much ground to limit our expression so much, because that's their whole game to slowly creep on what's normalized in our society and what is within the acceptable realms of self-expression. And ultimately the goal is to just erase queer people from existence altogether. So we can't cede that ground and say that we can't call ourselves Bible Belt Pussy. If we want to call ourselves Bible Belt Pussy and we're not hurting anyone, then we should be able to do that. So politician or not, it's regardless. And I completely disagree with this take from Madeline Chapman and a whole bunch of other, people who did criticize Winston Peters in these attacks, but still blamed the Greens for it. I think we need to stand up to bullies. I think we need to hold our ground. And as long as we're not hurting anyone, I think we should maintain that we can express ourselves and say whatever we want, whether it's criticizing the police or talking about our sexuality.
Yeah, come on. If there's no, what is the observable harm? Look at what Destiny's Church is doing, Look at Gloria Vale. Look at what the ACT Party is doing of Tim Jago, not calling him out when they should have, referring him to their, to David Seymour's godmother's law firm.
Yeah, she was a partner.
Just wild.
Here's another attack. Chloe Swarbrick's Anarchides and their TikTok manifesto from Andrea Vance, a popular reporter. And she says something that was, I think, extremely telling of why these attacks on the Green Party are happening. Of course, they go on about Tamitha Paul and her extremely reasonable, normal comments. But then they say, on foreign policy, their major preoccupation is with simplistic narratives on the Israel-Palestine conflict. Their arguments about speech and sensitivity are upended when Swarbrick insists on chanting slogans that offend Jewish people. Generalization. And she berates other MPs for not supporting a grandstanding sanctions bill. Grandstanding. While failing to understand what they do. That simplistic moral assumptions about the righteousness of the oppressed ignore the obstinate and intricate realities of our long-running conflict. Still, #River to the Sea, mocking anti-genocide protesters. Now, isn't that extremely telling? They are worried about the Greens making headway when it comes to seeking popular support for sanctioning Israel. And their bill to sanction Israel only needs 6 more government MPs to support it for it to go through to first reading. 6 MPs to support it in a conscience vote. And they're hella worried about that, as Andrea Vance has explicitly told us. And honestly, I just have to say, in any normal environment where we had a clear moral compass and understanding of right and wrong in society, this would be a career ender for Andrea Vance. She's just said that their bill to sanction Israel amounts to simplistic moral assumptions about the most documented genocide in history, the one that we are watching live streamed on our phones every single day. She thinks that children being decapitated, burnt alive, and people being raped to death in prisons is just too complicated to pick a side. She thinks that an 80-year-old colony that's been occupying the Palestinians and inflicting them to apartheid is just the obstinate and intricate realities of life. It just be how it bees. Like, my friend, if you cannot see the absolute horror, immorality, breach of international law, breach of every aspect of sacredness, of humanity, of animals, of the environment, a breach of every single line that you could possibly imagine, if you cannot see that Israel has been breaching all of these lines and committing all of these crimes against Palestinians, then you are warped in your brain. You have a serious lack of understanding of morality. You do not understand the difference between right or wrong. You're deluded in your little Zionist circle and convincing yourselves that somehow Israel is not necessarily the bad guy in this situation, because it is impossible at this stage to watch what's happening on the ground and not be disgusted by it, to not be screaming off the rooftops for them to stop, to not be begging the government to take some sort of position. And so, Andrea Vance, you genocidal maniac, get your shit together, stop embarrassing yourself, or continue exposing yourself, but we're going to keep exposing you for it.
Killed her.
And you know, so she makes this, she signposts that this is what's happening, that the sanctions bill is concerning for them. And you know, what's interesting is that just weeks after Chloe Swarbrick introduces her sanctions bill and says that we just need 6 MPs to support it and do a conscience vote for it to go through to first reading, surprise, surprise, Winston Peters comes out saying they're putting forward a bill that will remove the power of MP conscious votes. I mean, it's pretty on the point, right? It's pretty on point. The Zionist lobby, we can't estimate their power in this country. Of course, alongside just business interests who are threatened by the anti-capitalist corridor from the Greens. They are uniting against the Greens. They are worried about their standpoint on Israel. And they are using, to be honest, classic Zionist attack lines of accusing people of being predators and accusing them of sexual abuse. That's always what they do when they want to destroy someone's reputation. Every time. This does seem like a classic thing out of the Zionist playbook. Obviously, I can't prove it, but what I can say is that everyone who jumped in on these attacks, pretty much everyone that I've seen jump in on these attacks, whether it's Annie O'Brien or Winston Peters, is supportive of the Israeli genocide. Is, you know, in Winston Peters' position, outright enabling the Israeli genocide. So there is a massive overlap in terms of Zionism and just in general bigotry and pro-capitalist lobbying in this country. And, you know, who better to prove this point than Juliet Moses, one of the most raging Zionists in this country.
Before we move on, I just wanted to mention,
yes,
I wonder if that New Zealand First is actually scared that this bill is going to go through, that the Greens' plan to sanction Israel is going to work. are they scared of that, or is this just a performative thing that New Zealand First is doing, again, to speak to their constituents? You know, like, do we actually believe that some national MPs can be dragged across the line?
I think yes and no. It's a very interesting question. I feel like it is realistic that 6 people in national do have a heart.
Yeah,
and
but are
do
they
care about
allowed?
the
Will
situation.
they? You know, it's just a. I
But
mean,
even if they aren't,
Mm.
I feel like it's our duty to try our best to put the flame under their feet and to push them on it and to get an explicit position from them as well, you know? And so I do think that kind of regardless that we should do it. But I do hear what you're saying.
Yeah, like for me, it's just like, it's classic for New Zealand First. Like, they might even know that National has promised to not allow anyone to do a conscience vote, but they have to provide something to their communities, to their voters, just something. It may not amount to anything, but I think that that's their kind of style, to just put out meaningless, superficial things. But at the end of the day, hey, if you think that you can speak to some of the national MPs and get them over that line, kia kaha, more power to you, go for it.
I think we should try. I'm going to try and get a meeting with our guy and Grant McCullum.
Kapa.
He seemed like a human, maybe. Okay, so Juliet Moses, one of the biggest Zionists in this country, was one of those people that tweeted about this. And I just find this tweet particularly telling and sort of summarizes why all of these attacks on the Greens are happening, why the attack on Tamitha Paul is happening, why the attack on Benjamin Doyle is happening, why they're attacking Ricardo Menendez March for being Mexican and wearing leather jackets. I feel like this tweet explains why. Juliet Moses says this is part of Swarbrick's speech at the last weekend's anti-Israel protest. I don't really know what she's saying, not clever enough, but somehow the war is tied up with homelessness, the treaty, and capitalism. Nonsensical, dumbed down talking points from a critical theory 101 textbook. So they're threatened, they're deeply threatened by someone whose theory can connect all of our various oppressions and can help us make sense of the shared source of these oppressions, you know? Martin Luther King was only assassinated after he started connecting racism with capitalism and understanding that they share root causes. And that's what's happening to the Greens. They're just getting a little bit too woke for the establishment. And they don't like that. But of course, Chloe is entirely 100% right. What's happening in Israel is, of course, related to the colonization of Aotearoa. Whether it's the shared technology that they use, whether it's a shared ideology, or whether it's simply the fact that it's the same people perpetuating both, it's undeniable that the colonization of any country is related to the colonization of every other country. And actually, it was through this thread that I've muted Moses, that I found that Andrea Vance article. And, you know, they're like complaining about Tamitha Paul as well in there. Piling it on. And then Juliet Moses is like, exactly. And this. And that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. For a lot of these people, they are just so mad at the Greens' attacks on Israel and the way that they're connecting it with the oppressions at home. It is deeply scary for them. And, you know, I feel like for the Greens, this can't come as a surprise. When you come for Israel, they come for you. And that's why a lot of people don't speak out about Israel. That's why we've seen, if all, Labour MPs speaking out about Israel, other than people like Damien O'Connor, for example. You know, you could count on one hand how many Labour MPs have said anything about Palestine. Of course, National's worse. Of course, ACT's worse. Of course, New Zealand First is worse. I'm just saying it takes a lot of political capital to speak about the genocide. The Greens are doing it and they're not backing down. And I just think that, you know, despite the fact that I have my own disagreements with the Greens.
Yeah, sure.
And people since since I've been coming out quite strongly in support of the Greens, I've had some people like hit me up about some of the things that they don't like about the Greens, like supporting a deal with BlackRock when they were with Labour. And it's like, I understand. And I myself have my own criticisms of the Greens, like the Jobs for Nature program. I felt like in a lot of ways it just ended up subsidizing industry and people cleaning up after industry instead of addressing the root cause of the issue. But at the end of the day, they're the ones putting out very leftist narratives at the moment. They're the ones fighting for Palestinians. They're the ones fighting against capitalism.
I mean, these people that you're talking about who don't want to vote for Te Pāti Kakariki because of whatever things that they've previously supported, it's like you're never going to find a political party where you agree on everything. Like, we don't agree with Te Pāti Māori on everything. But to be fair, we try to take things a step further because we try to go to the appropriate place to solve a systemic issue, right? And in the political space, you know, to be a politician, right, you have to be convincing others. You have to bring people along with you. So maybe it's not that fair to say that we disagree. But to be fair, we do disagree with Te Pāti Māori on various things and with the Greens on various things. And that's totally normal. But the problem that I have with these people who don't want to vote for the parties that they most align with, but there's something stopping them from getting over the line, they'll then just not vote at all. Not vote at all, which is essentially voting for the other side. You know, if your vote is not going to, you know, to support the parties that we're talking about, it's essentially making the other side stronger. And that's always worse off. We need to gain some momentum. We need to create stepping stones that we can launch ourselves from. And so I just want to challenge people, you know, really look into all of the parties and tell me that you agree with everything that they do. I mean, so many people are harking back to the mandates, the COVID restrictions and whatnot. And it's like every political party in the world had the same narrative. It was a global agenda. You know, the rolling out of vaccines and things like that, and all of the recommendations that the World Health Organization had of all of these things. It was an unprecedented situation, and pretty much every political party in the world had the same stance in terms of encouraging vaccinations. I think maybe there was some difference on the mandates, but essentially it was an unprecedented time. And I don't feel it's fair to blame, especially our minor parties, for going along with this really global agenda. It felt like everyone essentially had to roll. Everyone was in climate disaster mode and just doing what they can. And I just don't think that it's fair for us to then completely write them off. In some cases, not vote at all, but in some cases end up voting for another party that is actually, you're not aligned with them at all, but hey, they spoke out on the mandates issue or
even though
something.
they supported it, you know, you have like that people perceive New Zealand First as being against the mandates, but they were fully supportive of it, you know. So
yeah,
these parties, they all talk, they're just trying to capture.
That's what I mean in terms of his superficialness, you know.
Yeah.
Winston Peters showed up at the Parliament protests to give a little speech or something, but he supported the mandates. But because he was there to give a little bit of a superficial nudge, a lot of people have been flocking to him. But you know, we've got to be more critical, e hoa ma, you know. But just, you know, you're never gonna agree with everything that a party puts out there. But we need to make some ground somehow.
I hope you're happy, Pere. The Anglo-Saxon is back and they're posting annoying comments. So.
Hey, annoying comments?
Well,
annoying is all right.
He's like against blocking people, but I think because I run the Twitter account very often.
Yeah.
And I just know how many racist trolls exist and that you do need to control them. I'm a bit more block friendly. But Kapai, whatever, he's not annoying us. Just like, you know, it goes without saying, but all of these Zionists, the ACT Party, Juliet Moses, Annie O'Brien, they're all Zionists. They support the massacre of children.
Right.
They outright support the burning alive and beheading of children on a daily basis. They support the torture of children in Israeli dungeons. They support Israel, who's the biggest child killer in the world. So these people aren't serious about children. Not only that, but they also do not talk about ACT's sexual abuse allegations.
Silence.
The fact that Tim Jago, a convicted pedophile, oversaw, along with David Seymour, a culture of mass sexual harassment, abuse, and bullying. It's extremely creepy. The rape culture within Young ACT is extremely widely reported. There's many articles about it. Many people within Young ACT and affiliates of Young ACT came out publicly with their names to say that they were personally sexually abused, or that they're aware of sexual abuse within Young ACT, and that the ACT Party leadership deliberately hid those allegations, tried to diminish from those allegations, victim blamed people coming out, and refused to set a sexual harassment policy. In one super egregious case, and we've talked about this at length on this show, the ACT Party's David Seymour, he actually poached a young person, a child, that was a young national member for one of the national MPs. And David Seymour approached her after her speech. It was about freedom of speech, and said, "Oh, that's a great speech. Maybe you should consider joining Young ACT." And then next thing he did, he posted her video on his Facebook page, and in her words, blew it up, getting her a bunch of attention. And then she ended up joining Young ACT, where she got sexually harassed, bullied, and victim blamed when she eventually came out in public to speak about it and resigned from her role as the leader of Young ACT. And so that story is super disturbing, because it's like signs of grooming, that David Seymour poached this young person, complimented them, posted their thing online, brought them into an extremely unsafe space. And then when she spoke out about it, do you know what Young ACT said to her? They said, if you're worried about sexual harassment in Young ACT, you should come up with a sexual harassment policy for us. Disgusting stuff, all in the public record, and Ali Gamater is herself speaking out about this. But this has never made it to the news about Tim Jago. They never contextualize the news about Tim Jago with the culture of Young ACT. They never, as you said, mention the fact that he sent the victims of Tim Jago to a law firm that's part owned by his godmother. That seems like an extremely basic fact, but for some reason it's been omitted. So you see One News trying to create something out of absolutely nothing when it comes out of Benjamin Doyle, but you have this massive stack of evidence about grooming, sexual harassment and rape culture within Young ACT, the fact that he tried to shelter Tim Jago, and for some reason it's just not making it to the news. Not only that, but David Seymour personally, along with that story about grooming Ali Gamater, he's done so many creepy things. Like, he's Snapchatted children. There's a video of him twerking in a very awkward and prolonged way, I must add, in front of school children. And this video that I'm going to play, because I am perpetually disturbed by.
Do you want to play the whole thing, or just the...
Do you want to
the
play
ACT
the
Party
whole thing?
brands itself as the party
Thank you,
of freedom.
Matata. Excellent
but is
video.
this freedom from accountability? A pattern of disturbing behavior. The ACT Party brands itself as the party of freedom, but is this freedom from accountability? A pattern of disturbing behavior exists within the ACT Party, from its former president to its leader and youth wing members. Ex-ACT Party president Tim Jago was recently convicted of indecent assault against teenage boys he mentored. While ACT distances itself, this is not an isolated incident within the party. Inappropriate behavior is deeply ingrained into the ACT Party culture. Take David Seymour's repeatedly inappropriate behavior around young people. At a Youth for ACT speech, he joked about politicians penetrating in the bedroom.
And the question is, where do politicians most often penetrate our sphere of liberty? Is it in the boardroom, or, as I hope not, in the bedroom?
He wore an objectifying got meat shirt at a college campus.
Oh, the got meat one.
But it's this
Gross.
photo of the barbecue that's now backfired on ACT MP David Seymour.
All
A huge misjudgment on David's part.
It's the t-shirt in particular that's sparked debate.
It's clearly sexualised and it's clearly demeaning and it's clearly comparing women to meat.
At Epsom Girls High School, he told a student she was way out of his league, which is usually only reserved for people that a person finds attractive.
You're way out of my league.
He encouraged students to add him on Snapchat at a conference.
He got too excited.
Yeah, I swear I'm not totally out of touch. You know, I'm on Snapchat, by the way. I just DBS83. I just put it out there.
He was in the news over Snapchats to school kids. He once Snapchatted a picture of a contraceptive to his followers saying, "Be safe, kids." This culture is reinforced by other incidents too. ACT youth leader Cameron Brown told Hanya Lim to get R-worded. After the 2023 election, 6 staff members and volunteers left the ACT party, with one of the reasons being the unfair treatment of women by the party.
How is David Seymour?
The ACT party
Still
brands
in
itself as the party.
Government.
Yeah.
How is he still here?
Yeah.
Despite all of this controversy. And what we're talking about with Benjamin Doyle, it's all hearsay. No evidence. Nothing. And it's all really, really innocent. But with ACT, it's like he's untouchable. Doesn't make any sense.
I think that, yeah, and it's part of sending a signal, right? If you oppose capitalist colonial norms, we'll come after you. But if you align with them, you can get away with saying sexually suggestive things to young girls, like you're out of my league. Kapai, so that's I think that's all we wanted to talk about when it came to Benjamin Doyle and the fascistic attacks on them.
Yeah, do we want to jump into the Human Rights Commissioner? Because Stephen Rainbow, a little bit linked. Or should we talk about our polls?
It was the polls.
Kapai. So let's jump into our next story. Just a small one. I wanted to talk about this RNZ Reid research poll, which came out on the 1st of April. And this is what it's looking like. The split of seats. The right bloc still ahead. I think they've got 62 seats. But the thing that I thought was interesting about this poll, and this is something that we need to grapple with and understand, this poll is just looking at party vote, okay? Not looking at electorate votes. And the seats that have been given to Te Pāti Māori here, this is based on them getting over the 5% threshold. And it's an interesting thing to think about if you are a Te Pāti Māori voter. And I don't really want to commit to saying that we're pushing a particular voting strategy, because I'd like to hear what Te Pāti Māori have to say, and also Te Pāti Kakariki, because they are involved in this. But generally, Te Pāti Māori does really well in electorate seats, or at least more recently, we've really seen them do really, really well in the electorate seats. And after Te Pāti Māori joined with the national government for, was it 3 terms? A couple terms. They then didn't make it back into government after that, because of course core voters of Te Pāti Māori were not happy with Te Pāti Māori going with the national, even though they were able to get policy gains over the line during that time, which cannot be understated. But they did real damage to Te Pāti Māori in siding with the national for so long. I don't blame them. To be honest, I don't blame them. And I think we need to leverage those kinds of positions more often. But I mean, that's a whole nother conversation there. But, for Te Pāti Māori to get back into Parliament, they won an electorate seat. If you win an electorate, you don't need to get over the 5% threshold. And so this makeup here that we're looking at, this is just looking at party votes, and it's looking at 120 seats, okay? The important thing for us to think about is what's called an overhang. An overhang. If you don't know what the parliamentary overhang is, do look into it. It's when you win more electorate seats than the list seats that you're entitled to by the party vote. Okay? So let's look at the results from the last election just to try and like elucidate the point a little bit more. Because I've been thinking about how to explain this for a while and I've been struggling, to be honest. So just bear with me. But here in the article it says, there is an overhang of 2 seats because Te Pāti Māori won more electorate seats than it would otherwise have from its share of the party vote. Okay, so for example, let's get to the numbers. The Green Party, in terms of their percentage, 11.6% was the party vote. Okay, they were then entitled to sorry, not a great example. It's hard to explain. I do struggle with this, but essentially, if you are entitled to 10 list seats via your party vote, and then you also win 10 electorate seats, the electorates will replace the party vote seats. You don't, if you win 10 electorates and also get 10 seats from the party vote, you don't get 20 seats. The electorates will replace those 10 seats that you got via the party vote. Okay? So, essentially, what I'm saying here, essentially, is that all of these party votes that Te Pāti Māori received, right here, all of those got eaten up by the electorates that they won. So they were entitled to, they didn't make it over the 5% threshold, right? They didn't actually make it over the 5% threshold. But if they did make it over the 5% threshold,
still under 6 list seats, all of those votes would have been wasted. So already all of those 83,973 votes didn't go towards anyone being in parliament because they got more, well, firstly, yeah, as you say, they didn't pass the 5% threshold, but also, even if they did, if they got more more electorate MPs, then the party vote allows them for, the whole party vote gets wasted. So what we're saying is if you give those 88,000 votes to the Greens, we add seats. And it actually adds seats to the total number of seats in parliament, because what happens is if you get more electorate seats than your party votes, they actually add more seats to government to account for those electorate seats.
Yeah, that's the overhang. And so then, normally you need over 60 seats to win a majority, right? So if we go back to this is based on 120 seats, okay? But if some of these seats that Te Pāti Māori won in this poll, if instead these party votes went to the Green Party would increase the amount of seats that they receive because they're receiving Te Pāti Māori's votes, yeah? And if, and this is the key thing, if Te Pāti Māori win their electorates, let's say they win back their current 6 electorates, they will still keep those 6 seats. Like, let's say if Te Pāti Māori gets 0, which is a crazy thing, but if they get 0% of the party vote and all of those votes go to the Greens, it just means more seats. If they win their 6 electorates, then there will be an overhang of 6 seats. 126 seats will then be in Parliament. It makes the majority a lot bigger that you need to get over the line.
Yes, it increases the numbers for the left bloc.
Yeah, in total. And this is when strategic voting needs to come into play. If this is a strategy that we're going to pursue, the Green Party generally don't do well in electorates. So they are the safest party to give a party vote to. And I'll say, Te Pāti Māori, no doubt they will want to grow their party vote. The more you grow your party vote, the more opportunities that you will have and the stronger that you'll be as an actual real party. But I think we need to be strategic, in terms of getting more people on the Māori roll to increase the amount of Māori electorates. We're very, very, very close to another electorate popping up. So then we'll have 8 electorates. So, my hope is that Te Pāti Māori win the current 7 electorates. Maybe for the next election, there will be a new electorate that's added. Then there will be 8 seats that can go to Te Pāti Māori. And then all of those party votes going to the Greens, because I don't think that the Greens are going to win more electorates than their party votes. So those are safe votes going to the Greens.
Yes, and in that same vein,
like, for
the
example,
Labour votes are similarly wasted.
The Labour votes are definitely wasted. If you are party voting Labour, because the Labour Party, their electorates are very cemented into
Solid as.
the landscape of Aotearoa's political landscape.
Yeah.
Generally, Labour's electorate wins will eat up like 20 or 30 of their. So what do they win? They
They got the same amount. So all of those party votes, 767,000 votes for Labour, could have been added to the Greens without taking any seats away from Labour, because they got 17 electorate seats.
This is confusing me a little bit. The 17 list seats is what they had left over after the electorate seats had already gobbled them up.
Oh.
Because they get 26.9% of the party vote.
Mm-hmm.
We need to do some quick maths. I'm terrible at maths, but 26.9% of 120 seats. Anyway, they always do well in the electorate seats, and I see no reason to vote for them in that regard. It's just their seats are just going to get eaten up, or a big bulk of their seats is going to get eaten up by their electorate seats, considering how disproportionately not as well the Greens do in their electorate seats. Based on the 3 parties, the safest party vote to ensure that your party vote is not eaten up by acquiring an electorate seat is to give it to the Green Party.
Okay, so what I said about Labour was wrong, everyone. Scratch that. I don't know why I had it in my head that party vote for Labour is a waste, but it says there that they're actually adding the electorate and list seats. So, Arohamai, I take that back. We're going to have to come back to the
It's a
strategic
confusing one.
conversation when we have a little bit more info.
Yeah, it's just something that I wanted to put on people's agenda, just to think about it. Think about the overhang. Think about, like, definitely if you are Māori, you're on the Māori roll, it should be an electorate vote for Te Pāti Māori. And then I would say, think about it if you want to give your party vote to Te Pāti Māori, or if you want to give it to a party where the vote is actually going to count towards an additional seat. If you want it to count towards an additional seat, then you should think about the overhang. But if you simply want to grow Te Pāti Māori's base, then, kei a koe te tikanga, it's totally up to you. And I think there's a good argument for doing that. But considering we're on the cusp, and we only need a couple more seats, it's something to think about. I don't really want to tell people where to go specifically, but it's really something to think about.
Someone says that even if a party gets less than 5% but gets an electorate, their party vote percent will also be calculated.
It will. Like, for example, when Te Pāti Māori got back in, Rawiri Waititi, he won his electorate, but they also received 1.2% of the party vote. They just got over the threshold to add another MP. Only just. And so it would be a terrible thing if Te Pāti Māori didn't win their electorates and then you also didn't give them the party vote. It would be
risky strategy.
It would be very risky. It would be very risky. But the trajectory that we're on, and people understanding that a new Māori electorate may open up, which could potentially be another seat for the left bloc, and considering how well Te Pāti Māori are doing.
On the electorates, yeah.
Considering how well they're doing, I think back in the day, they were fighting off their association with the National Party. But now they've got strong kōrero about tino rangatiratanga challenging the Crown's bullshit, which is the next thing we'll talk about.
Yeah.
But just have a think about it,
Yeah.
Ehuama, because in this poll here, we're only a couple seats off. And there's a lot of potential there. Like, I assume in the very near future that New Zealand First and others are going to come after these electorates, Māori electorates.
Oh, kapai, well, if 26.91% of 120 is 32%, and then they ended up getting 34 seats.
Quick maths.
That means that they only got an extra 2 seats from the electorate seats. Yeah, I agree. We need to work on some graphs and stuff, but yeah, so that's interesting. Kapai, something to think about, e te whānau.
Kapai.
But yeah, good segue into Te Pāti Māori and the Privileges Committee.
Yep, so Te Pāti Māori. Let's just listen to you all remember this haka. A haka that shook the world. So we all remember this. It was during, I think it was the first reading of the Treaty Principles Bill, during the hikoi. And this went off around the world, right? Indigenous peoples, especially, all over the world resonated with this. And it's a beautiful thing when you see this kind of thing. You know, this is the colonial house that was forged to oppress our people, to force a particular ideology, a particular sovereign over us, despite the fact that we have in Te Tiriti the guarantee of our own sovereignty, our own tino rangatiratanga. And to just see this raw expression, it's such an incredible thing, such a beautiful thing. It spoke to people all over the world. Hannah had her pay docked because of it. And then furthermore, they've had to go to what's called the Privileges Committee to assess what the consequences will be for them breaking standing orders. And the standing order was that they got up out of their seats. That's what they're being punished for getting up out of their seats. And you just look at the gallery. Everyone's just like, and I think Penny Henare, he gave a good response. He also got a bit of a slap for this one, but he gave a great response. Just that he felt the energy, felt the wairua. He could feel the people in the gallery doing their haka. People all over the motu participating in the hikoi. The energy was so incredibly fierce in this moment that he couldn't help himself but to support this expression of our people's frustration at what is currently going on. And I completely agree with him on that one. But anyway, the government has declined Te Pāti Māori's requests, one of them being that the privileges community should hear from a tikanga expert. They've denied that. And of course, it's very important to hear from a tikanga expert because, you know, this is the colonial house. They know nothing about Te Ao Māori. And for me, Māori MPs, especially those who have gotten in on the Māori electorates, you know, the Māori electorates are there because of Te Tiriti o Waitangi. The Māori electorates are there because the Crown has to honour their position of engaging, you know, allowing representation for Māori in the House. How we choose to engage with the Crown, with their political system that they're forcing on us, is completely, in my opinion, completely up to us. Completely up to us. It's you know, we honour them by participating in their political system. And so for them to then put all of these bullshit requirements on our people and how we want to engage is just ridiculous. And so other things that they denied Te Pāti Māori. Te Pāti Māori have legal counsel who have only been available on specific dates, like Chris Finlayson, a previous National Party MP. He's busy with the Kaitahu water case down south. And so, you know, Te Pāti Māori put forward dates that Chris Finlayson would be available, and that was declined. He would be the best person, in my opinion, to speak, or at least to give legal counsel for Te Pāti Māori, because he understands the rules of this colonial house, but he also, through being a treaty negotiations minister for a long time with the National, understands the complexities that exist here in terms of Māori exercising their tino rangatiratanga around the context of this colonial house. And, you know, there needs to be some give and take. There needs to be some give and take here. I support Te Pāti Māori completely in their stance here of refusing this privileges committee hearing. What they're doing is they're running their own hearing, I think on May the 7th, I believe. Wednesday, May the 7th. So they're going to run their own hearing. And I'm very excited to hear from them how they think this should be addressed. Instead of having the rules dictated to us, right? Instead of having these things dictated to us, they're actually going to kōrero and wānanga about how a response might look from a te ao Māori centric position, but in the colonial house, which is it's an interesting thing, but it's the kind of thing that I want to see Te Pāti Māori doing more. You know, putting their foot down, challenging the status quo. Challenging the status quo is what I really want to see Te Pāti Māori do. And I think they do it great. I think they've been doing it ever since they got back in. And I take my hat off to them completely. Very, very excited to see what comes of this. One of the consequences is potentially that they're all going to have their pay docked. And I think, you know, if money is the thing in the way of us standing in our tino rangatiratanga, then so be it. Dock it, and let's find ways around that. I'm sure there are campaigns we can run and fundraisers that we can do. I mean, I think MP's salary for the year is like, it's like close to $1 million. So, but you know, if money is the only thing in the way of Te Pāti Māori being true to our aspirations of tino rangatiratanga, then I hope they go down that route. I hope they don't allow that to be their barrier. And I hope the rest of us, the community, wrap around them. Because the government, the government needs to understand that they do not hold, a monopoly of power here in the country. You know, te tiriti o Waitangi, you know, there was never a war where we were conquested, where this new sovereignty has a legitimate claim to put themselves over the top of us. We had a treaty, and the positions of the treaty are very clear. You know, if we were conquested, it could be a different discussion, but that never happened. There was an agreement that we would both exist here together under our own systems. So again, just take my hat off to Te Pāti Māori. Make sure that you support them. Come May the 7th, there'll be lots of press around it, I'm sure. Make sure you tune in and wrap the aroha around them. They're going to need it because these attacks against them, they're just going to keep coming. Just like against the Greens as well, they are going to keep coming. And these principled positions are something that I think we all need to get behind.
Kia ora. Kia ora, yeah. It's, you know, the colonizers are allowed to put a bill forward that wants and aims to extinguish the rights of Indigenous people in this country. They're allowed to put laws forward that will increase the death of people in this country, that will increase the police brutality of people in this country, that will increase the impoverishment that leads to sickness and death of people in this country. But we are not allowed to respond with anger. We are not allowed to raise our voices. We are not allowed to use disrespectful language. And so they really do act like they have a complete monopoly on violence, oppression, strong language, you know, openly white supremacist language, violent language like blowing up ministries, breaking the law, like bringing in a vehicle onto the steps of parliament, grooming children, so on and so forth. The establishment is entitled and in fact has a monopoly on all of these actions. But when we want to respond in a non-violent, culturally appropriate way, they bring out the respectability politics. All of a sudden, civility matters. All of a sudden, we need to treat each other with respect and respect the rules of the house. But they've been shitting on the very fundamental rules of Te Tiriti o Waitangi since the bloody day they formed this colonial government.
I was just saying, someone's brought up Rawiri, Debs and Rawiri get just over 180k. We can fundraise that. E hoa ma. Easy. We can do that.
And since we're touching on comments, someone again called us out for like not describing the way that the party votes and electorate votes interact. And yeah, I really don't want to be spreading false information. So our sincere apologies if we said anything wrong in that space. And go read Kai Matara's article on the MMP system and how we can leverage it, because I'm sure they are much more knowledgeable on the scope of it than us.
Oh, misinformation? Jeez.
Oh,
I'm sure
the Labour thing.
We'll definitely put out some easy, because I'm still exploring it myself. Like, for example, how much of an overhang can you have? Like, if Labour, for example, won all of their electorates and didn't get any party vote, you know, is that an extra 50 seats? Do we then have 107? So there are things about the overhang that I don't understand, but it's just something to think about. Just put it on the radar coming, because, you know, it's still a year and a bit, and it's good for us to think about these things and talk about these things, because the political parties are going to be thinking about how they want to approach this as well. And in terms of deals, you know, will the Greens and Te Pāti Māori cut various deals? Will the Greens sit in Te Taitokiro? Will they sit in Tāmaki Makaurau? Will Labour sit in those electorates as well to compete for those seats, which could contribute to a bigger left bloc? These are all things that they'll be talking about right now. So just good for us to start thinking about it. But yeah. If we weren't clear, aroha mai, we'll try put out some more solid information on it. And I'm going to look into it tomorrow, actually, and I'll see if I can put some graphs together.
Kapaya, maybe we'll clarify everything in the next episode. But agreed, the mere fact that, you know, even us, after reading into it, still don't fully comprehend how the whole system works. It should be super transparent, should be taught in schools. We should all know it like the back of our hands, because our entire future rests on it.
Kia ora. Ka pai. All right, let's kick on. We're going to talk about Samah's gangster appearance on the New Zealand Leftist Collective. The New Zealand Leftist Collective...
I know some of y'all were there, that I can see your name in the comments.
Run by Doc Studios, Pat Brittenden. I think Chewy does some admin. Great job to Pat and Chewy for the platform that they've created. I remember us watching in the early days, and yeah, just like watching the grind, really, really impressive. And so now they've got this thing called the New Zealand Leftist Collective, right? It's an interesting thing. For me, I'm not comfortable with seeing Labour so centered in this idea of a leftist collective.
Right.
You know? I mean, how do you feel about it? How was your experience on the
Well, I had a really good experience. I thought Pat did a great job at moderating. He asked me numerous questions when he wanted to clarify my position on things, and I feel like I got ample time to speak. So I honestly have no complaint about the way that Pat ran that interview. I thought it went great.
Yeah, I think you did a great job.
But I likewise don't think that Labour supporters should represent the majority of something that's called the Leftist Collective.
Yeah.
It's fine to bring them in, especially in the context of pushing them, right?
Every now and
bringing
again.
in Kieran to push him on Hipkins' comments about Tamitha Paul. I thought that was a really brilliant idea by Pat, and I'm so thankful that we got the opportunity to talk to him face to face about that. But it seems like everyone on that panel was a Labour supporter.
Yeah, and that's
not
problematic.
anti-Greens or anything like that, but or Te Pāti Māori, but just, you know, did believe in the Labour Party as representing leftists in Aotearoa.
Which I think we can't allow that to happen, you know. We need to bring Labour further to the left. And if Labour is being centred as the leftist party or the home of the left or central to the left, you know, that's them positioning themselves as like, we're okay where we are. We don't need to go any further. You know?
Yeah.
For me, they're quite clearly a centrist party with potentially because it's all in the context of Aotearoa, right? We're not looking at Labour and calling them a left-leaning party in the context of Labour parliaments all over the world. I don't think that's fair. I think we need to look at it in the context of Aotearoa. In the context of Aotearoa, there are big ticket items that we want to move on that there's no way the Labour Party will support them. Like, in terms of acknowledging Māori tino rangatiratanga, Labour and National have pretty much been in lockstep on that. Labour has been putting forward some half-baked kind of, you know, their style half-baked crown solutions to Māori issues, and they never have Māori-centric perspectives, or they never, like the Waitangi Tribunal, that was opposed by Māori. Introduction of the principles instead of actually honouring the text of Te Tiriti, that was opposed by Māori. Foreshore and seabed under Labour, that's what created Te Pāti Māori. Things like capital gains taxes, the monopolistic entities that exist, and the privatisation of some of our sectors, especially the fast tracking. You know, Labour did start that route of fast tracking, opening up that pathway for National.
And bringing in numerous projects that were opposed by iwi that people are still fighting in courts today that had absolutely nothing to do with COVID, even though they pretended like their fast track law was about a response to COVID. So in so many ways, Labour set the ground for what National is doing. They depleted our democratic processes through things like the fast track bill, through breaching the human rights laws by lowering the age of criminality to 12 years old in many cases, and so many other examples, even so far as bringing in Compass, the notoriously bad food provider, to feed 11,000 children in this country. That contract was actually given to them by Labour and then built on by National to make them the national provider. So in so many ways, we have evidence that Labour is national light. And I did try and bring up a lot of these things in the interview. One thing that I wish that I'd highlighted a little bit more is the fact that Labour is upholding the colonial state.
Kia ora.
Simply that.
It's simple.
And the way that they haven't moved in any meaningful way to try and create space for the alternative Māori governance structure that is separate entirely from the colonial structure.
But that's sharing power. And that's something.
True sharing power, you know? And often Labour will bring in things that's like, we as a colonial government will provide something specific to Māori, but it will be coming from the colony and coming from colonial structures. But what Māori have asked for time and time again is for them to be able to provide those services for their own people, led by them themselves, not led by the colonial government. None of this paternalistic bullshit that both National and Labour are all about, but specifically for them to enable tino rangatiratanga. So yeah, I do wish that I'd just discussed the fact that Labour is upholding the colonial capitalist state, and because it is so violent and so destructive, this is destroying our environment, our potential futures. It's impoverishing people, killing them, putting them in prison, so on and so forth. If they're not directly working against that colonial capitalist infrastructure, then they are part of the problem. And they are very much part of the problem. They form that establishment and they've upheld it for many, many years. And why do I distinguish the Green Party into Pāti Māori? Because they're explicitly anti-establishment. They get in the house day in and day out and explicitly say, we are against this capitalist structure. We are against the profit motive that drives these exploitative industries. We are against the colonization of our people, and we support tino rangatiratanga and land back. So even if their policies are not able to reach those goals, I think it is so important that they explicitly call the problem out, poke the bubble of colonialism, and highlight the fact that we are living under colonial rule, because in my view, that is the very first step to changing the system and creating an alternate reality. But so for as long as we have parties like Labour validating the current colonial capitalist system, not pointing out that we need to drastically move away from it, it validates it, perpetuates it, and keeps it going.
Kia ora. And I think, we should support this show that they've created, but I think we should try and just gently, or maybe not so gently, nudge them to be braver in terms of some of the guests that they have on. I mean, that's a Tino Rangatiratanga flag, that's the backdrop of that little collective there, a Tino Rangatiratanga flag. And so if you're creating a show called the Leftist Collective and you're gonna use the Tino Rangatiratanga flag, I think it's not unfair to expect some guests that can actually speak to Tino Rangatiratanga. And it's just, I think we need to, like, I want to support this show, but as well I think there is some accountability that needs to happen as well. And to see the left using the Tino Rangatiratanga flag and centering the whakaaro of Labour,
which doesn't support Tino Rangatiratanga. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's a dangerous space. It's moving what it feels like. It's moving the left more to the center.
Right.
Which and I'm just one person, but it's not something that I want to see. So I'm not trying to throw too much shade on the boys. I do encourage people to go and support the show, but let's put out those gentle reminders that if you're gonna claim to be the Leftist Collective, then let's actually see some leftists on the show. Said with aroha.
And I offered as well, like before we started the show, to connect them with some wahine Māori, because in my humble opinion, wahine Māori are leading the leftist movement in Aotearoa. And as far as I know, they haven't been platformed on that show before, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to. I think they've only had 3, so it hasn't been much at all. But I would love to see some wahine Māori voices. In every activist space that I've been at, it's wahine Māori leading it.
Yep.
And they're the ones pushing the consistently radical and consistent kōrero and values that they apply across the board. And so they are the perfect people to position as leftists, in my opinion. And it would have been awesome in this particular case as well, because we're talking about Tamitha Paul, wahine Māori, representing the most incarcerated Indigenous woman in the world. It would have been nice to listen from a wahine Māori, and because we didn't have that on there, I did feel a personal responsibility to bring in the fact that Māori women were so especially brutalized and mistreated by police in prisons. But yeah, I definitely could have talked about
you did great.
a little bit
You did a
more.
great job. You did a great job. And I think, we received a lot of feedback from a lot of people saying that they really appreciated the points that Samah brought up.
Some people said I was angry, which is quite hilarious.
Oh, that is so classic, right? As soon as men are challenged, as soon as they started to feel a little bit uncomfortable, suddenly you're like this crazy, aggressive, yelling woman.
Just by a couple of comments, not many people, but yeah, it definitely came across that people thought I was like aggressive and stuff. And it's like funny, but because it was like the 1 out of 5 people that had the opinion that I had. So even if I was like seemingly combative, it should have been seen as acceptable because I was up against 4 others, But yeah, it is this classic thing of like, if women are passionate, they're seen as angry and aggressive, but men are allowed to be passionate. And, there's studies proving this. That like, for example, when women speak the exact same amount as men, studies show that people thought the women spoke more than the men.
Right.
And they're always perceived that women speak more than men, even if it's not true. So yeah, there is like a massive sexism problem in all of the spaces in our society. And this is an issue I'd love to talk more about on this show. It's very close to my heart. It's definitely not just a problem in the left. It's in every sector of our society, because we have to remember that all of the problems that we see in wider society under colonial capitalist rule are self-replicating within all of our movements. So we have to actively work against racism in all of these sexism in all of these spaces. We have to actively try and platform women, and especially Māori women, because their voices are often erased. And so, yeah, there is like conscious effort that has to go into tackling this issue that I don't think we're putting enough energy into as leftists. But it's something that I certainly would love to talk more about, and it was great that we were able to at least touch on it on this, although I don't think Kieran wanted to go there.
I don't think he expected it, and fair enough that but it's just indicative of what this platform is. He did not expect to come onto this platform and be challenged from a leftist perspective. So it just speaks to where Labour assumes the left are. All of them did not expect to be challenged. And it's funny when you challenged them, and some people are saying, oh, you're just giving ammunition to National. But it's like, guys, it's okay to talk with your friends, a little air quote, no, they're friends, but I mean, acquaintances, but it's okay to talk with other parties. It's, it's not, it's just, I feel like all of us are falling into this trap of really being overly critical of what you're saying, and assuming that it's a binary, right? People are like, you're either bigging them up and defending them, or you're trying to tear them down. But no, there is also another thing in there of being like a critical friend, of actually bringing up important and valid points that have justifications. There's nothing wrong with bringing up kōrero to challenge someone's position. It's totally fine, and it's something that we drastically need to do. We need to be continuously challenging each other's positions on things.
Absolutely.
So that we can actually strengthen these positions. And so I don't buy into, these people saying that, oh, you can't give them ammunition. It's like, no. We need to actually strengthen all of our parties that we're aligned with and partly aligned with. And we need to tell them to be truthful. And we also need to challenge them so that people who are, sucked in by their kōrero can realize that there is actually more nuance. There is actually a debate to be had. If we don't challenge Labour, then everyone really is just going to fall into the binary. So, I think it's very important for us to show that there is an alternative to Labour, and that there is a reason for that alternative. They're too much trying to play both sides, Labour, and when they try to play both sides, they can't create any real long-lasting solutions because they're not actually telling the truth about the problem. They're not telling the truth about what the actual solution is, because they're stuck trying to play both sides. So we need to challenge them and insert some honesty into the equation so that people can understand that there is actual real solutions on the left. You have to be brave with those solutions, but Labour will never take that step to be brave with talking about the actual solutions. So we're going to have to be the ones to provide it, which is a difficult thing to do, because then it's like you're getting hate from both sides. But ultimately, the left or the center left, or whatever you want to call, the left of the center, it strengthens us. It only helps us if we challenge each other and demand each other to do better. So I really do encourage more people to do it.
Totally. And on that point of Labour opening the door for the Treaty Principles Bill with the Foreshore and Seabed Act, they also helped to open the door with them allowing the New Zealand First Bill to remove all references to the treaty from legislation, and that was their explicit goal of that bill at the time. Labour actually entered into a coalition agreement that allowed that bill to go through first reading, which is the exact same process that National has now been doing with the Treaty Principles Bill. So again, Labour has normalised this idea of allowing an explicitly anti-tiriti bill to go through to to first reading. So yeah, they're willing to flirt with the far right, and that's just simply not good enough.
Killed it.
Papai.
Anything else to say before we move on?
No, just want to reiterate that I'm really thankful that they brought me on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, none of this
absolutely.
criticism discounts the fact that I'm extremely grateful I was brought on, very humbled that I was thought of, and really thankful that Pat moderated that show in such a great way.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you very
So
much
thank
appreciated.
you, BHN team,
Kia ora.
Doc Studios.
Bye. All right, next, let's jump into Treaty Principles Bill.
Bye.
Why are we on Google?
Oh, I just wanted to show that the way that David Seymour, the ACT Party, and the media are in full-on damage control mode. Look at those two first ones. Watch live. David Seymour replies, and they gave him like almost
Centering
half an
David.
hour to respond to the select committee conclusions that came out, which is hilarious. You know, they could have interviewed some of the people who represented the vast majority of submissions that were against it. They could have sent it to Pāti Māori or one of the people that submitted against it, but instead they brought in David Seymour, who only had 8% of submissions in his support, to do this press conference. And, you know, this other New Zealand article, alarming concerns, Seymour defends treaty bill amid overwhelming opposition. So, yeah, it's all about David Seymour's
David Seymour, always. And then he just gets to reiterate his bullshit. And you know, what did he say? He's like, oh, all we learnt from the submissions is that they don't have a good argument. Like, he's not willing to listen to our arguments because he wants to frame the argument. You know, he's always saying, this is how you should argue. You know, people who oppose this bill need to tell me X, Y, Z. It's like, why is he trying to tell us how we should frame our criticism of his bill?
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's just so insane.
It's hilarious the way that he's trying to twist this to be a win for himself. And it just shows how utterly embarrassing this is. I'm going to get into his tweet soon, but I just wanted to say that, like, although this is a massive win, that 270,000 of 300,000 submissions were against the bill, that they will include all of the submissions in the public record, there are still really big issues with the democratic process and the way that they've treated this bill. For example, yes, they've backtracked from not including all of the submissions in the public record, but they did decide to bring forward the deadline to the Select Committee for the Treaty Principles Bill by a whole month, thereby not allowing them to include all of the submissions in the consideration of the Select Committee. So yes, while those submissions will be included in the public record, they're not going to be included in the Treaty Principles Bill Select Committee process, and they won't be included in their reports. And so they released their final report today, but Duncan Webb pointed out yesterday that actually the committee explicitly said that the deadline is going to be the 14th of May. And then later they said that randomly came out of the blue and said that it had to be tomorrow instead and moved it ahead. So they did that. They moved the date ahead specifically so that they didn't have to deal with it anymore, specifically so that they could turn the chapter from this extremely embarrassing episode. And it's quite telling because David Seymour explicitly said, we didn't expect that many submissions, which is quite the admission, really. And then, you know, Luxon said, oh, look, we just want to move on. We just want to move on. And I'm like, mate, you're the ones who put this issue on the table against everyone's requests. You forced us to go through this horrific Select Committee process. You forced us to defend the most basic truths about this country and this country's history. And now you're saying, oh, we just want to move on. And the opposition is playing politics by trying to prolong the Treaty Principles Bill debate. What a joke. This entire Treaty Principles Bill debate has been a political game for National and ACT and New Zealand First. And now they're accusing us of playing political games for simply requesting that everyone's submissions get properly counted in the Select Committee process.
So sad. All of the people who volunteered hours, you know, to get working groups together, to go create like submission parties, helping the elderly and children to write their submissions, and then telling people, that, oh, this is a chance for your voice to be heard. This is a chance for you to be a part of the process.
It's democracy.
And then to just have the government be like, oh, we're just going to erase those. We just don't have time to deal with it. It's outrageous. And just comes back to this thought of mine that, we can't trust this government. We can't trust them to engage with our people in a respectful way, in the respectful way that they deserve. And that's why, this whole thing has been such a bad thing for, in terms of how Māori perceive the government and the Crown. We already have enough reasons to not trust the government and the Crown. And this has just been a classic, the most classic of examples, for them to dredge up all of these things, to drag us through having to justify our existence in this political system, having us have to defend te tiriti o Waitangi, the po that protects our rights, forcing us to engage in this way, and then the gall to say that they're not going to include people's submissions is just... The damage is going to be irreparable, not just for Labour, but for this whole government. Generations to come, people will be saying, do you remember the Treaty Principles Bill? This party who only received 8% was able to put through one of the most, what could have been the most devastating attacks against our people. And the government was happy for that discussion to be out there. And not only that, but they elongated the submission select committee process to 6 months, so that political rhetoric, it's like a jester. It's just a joke, this distraction that took place while National moves to privatize our country, to slash our public services. Like more people are being slashed from Kainga Ora currently. Like, what was it? It's like so many jobs slashed from Kainga Ora.
Another 500 and something jobs.
An insane amount to a sector that's already so incredibly strained. Section 7AA is going to be removed soon. What are we, in terms of criticizing Benjamin Doyle and keeping children safe, Section 7AA is one of those things that actually helps to keep our children safe, and the current government is removing it.
Meanwhile, the abuse rate at Oranga Tamariki has been increasing under this government.
So, they used it as a distraction to capture us, and then they disrespect us in the way that we've engaged in the process.
Yes, David Seymour called the submissions today spam. He also said that in all the 270,000 submissions that were received, there was not one good argument made against his shit. It's hilarious. But regardless of the fact that they are so irrational and nonsensical, the fact that they tried to exclude thousands of submissions from the record, not just the select committee process, but the record altogether, it's hilarious to me that the media tried to frame the Todd Stevenson move to include them in the public record as a ACT intervention that saved the day. They tried to frame it like ACT came through, saved the day with this what do you call the motion to ensure the public record keeps those submissions. It's hilarious because they're the ones who wanted to not include it in the first place. They're the ones who brought forward the date by a whole month so that those submissions were not included. And, it kind of echoes what I was saying about, like, National beats us up so that they can convince us that crumbs are okay. Of course, I'm happy that these submissions are going to be included in the public record. They include handwritten submissions, drawings by children, for example. But they should have been included in the select committee report.
Yeah.
They shouldn't have moved that forward a month. This is definitely not a win for democracy, and we should definitely not be thankful. Oh, I'm not even showing it. ACT Party ensures public record for Treaty Principles Bill.
Right.
Submission. So yeah, Harold thinks we should thank the ACT Party for.
It reminds me, like, this government has nothing for Te Iwi Māori. The only thing that they have for Te Iwi Māori is promising that they're going to stick to their coalition agreement of only allowing it to select committee. And like the only good thing that National has that they're offering us is that they're going to keep to that they're not going to allow it. So it's like, we're going to keep to the thing we promised. We're not going to break our promise about a shit thing that we're trying to do. We are going to just stay with the current level of shitness that it is. Don't worry, we're not going to make it even worse. Like, that's literally the only thing that they have to give us.
I wanted to go through David Seymour's insane cope.
Oh,
He's coming out with the most ridiculous things to try and make the situation less embarrassing for himself. And so he wrote this massive coping novel on Twitter, where they're like, actually, all of these submissions prove that we're right. And they explicitly said the submissions came in their thousands to oppose the bill, but only succeeded in showing why Parliament should pass it into law. How the frick does that work? 3 plus 2 equals 500. And if you don't agree, you don't understand how democracy works. It's basically the logic that they're applying here. And I think it's actually quite telling, because for the ACT Party, democracy is the 8% extremely wealthy minority and powerful minority in this country should overpower the entire majority at the expense of everyone else in the country and our environment and habitats. And that's democracy. Democracy is that minority just ruling over us and oppressing us all. And I think this tweet proves it, because they think thousands of people opposing their bill somehow attest to the fact that the 8% who supported the bill were the right ones.
So frustrating. It reminds me of the Juliet Moses quote that you had up before, and she's talking about how Chloe Swarbrick doesn't make sense, right? Like, they're just trying to gaslight us and say that, oh, no, what they're talking about doesn't make sense. None of it is sensible. It's all crazy. And he's doing the same kind of thing, just trying to frame us as nonsensical. Trying to frame us as if we don't have a point, but it's very clear.
The irony is that they're being so irrational.
Yeah.
So nonsensical. How the frick is 90% of submissions opposing it proof that you're right? How the frick is that democratic anyway to still be pushing for that bill to go through? They're so nonsensical, so irrational, and so emotionally attached to dominating and colonizing others. And they just entirely project that on us, who are simply pointing to the reality and the truth of what Te Tiriti o Waitangi says.
They have to be powerful, or perceived as being powerful, right? Any sign of weakness, they will not allow it, you know? Like an apology. Was it an apology from David Seymour, and Jerry Brownlee read it?
Oh, yeah.
For him?
Yes.
And it's like, it's as if the ACT Party was like, oh, no. We don't want video existing of a David Seymour saying, I'm sorry, I got this wrong, I apologize. Like, even with Luxon, this is why he couldn't bring himself to say that he was going to fire that dude. I can't remember his name.
Andrew Bailey?
Right. Is that the guy? Yeah. He couldn't bring himself to say that he would fire the guy because it's just too much. It's like, oh, I made a mistake, I have to fire someone. He was more just sticking to the line of, no, I have my expectations, and everyone knows that those are the that's all we have to worry about. He couldn't bring himself
of guilt,
to be responsible, and it's just it's gaslighting, and it's weak. It's so superficial, you know. It's just not real. Like, he's gaslighting us into saying all of this shit, and it's that confidence that he's relying on for his constituents to stick with him.
Yeah, exactly. There is a certain aspect of being a bully, I guess, of not wanting to ever admit that you're wrong. It definitely seems like a tactic of the right wing.
Yeah.
If I can just leave you for 1 minute.
All good, all good. You want to try and scoot past me?
Yeah.
Aroha mai, e te iwi, we got a tight little setup here.
La la la, I'm on your microphone.
Oh no, she's leaving me by myself. What am I going to do? All right, let's talk shit about Samah, everyone. No. So, we're just going to cover one last story before we go. And it's about Stephen Rainbow. Stephen Rainbow. We talked about him a little bit in the start, right? Yeah, he's another one of those characters that's connected with the Free Speech Union. And why is this group popping up everywhere? The Free Speech Union. It feels like in every single show we talk about the Free Speech Union. It's crazy. Annie O'Brien, who was one of the main people to break that nothing story about Benjamin Doyle, she is a member of the Free Speech Union. And when we talked about the biggest attacks against our protest movements, that report that came up from the IPCA that was empowered by the Free Speech Union, when David Seymour talks about how the majority of people support the Treaty Principles Bill, which is what he said in his press release, he said the majority of people actually support the bill. That evidence that he's got, that he's referring to, was from a poll that Courier Market Research put out. And Courier Market Research is run by, of course, David Farrar, who is a founder, I believe, of the Free Speech Union. Like, they're everywhere. They're literally everywhere. And anyway, Samah's back, so I'm gonna. Oh, actually, you sit in. You can be the dungeon master.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I heard you mentioning the poll that he tried to use, which is hilarious.
I'm smaller now.
Because just like he was like a reputable polling source.
Oh, exactly. He called it a reputable polling source rather than actually saying where it had come from.
Yeah, exactly. Didn't want to mention Courier.
Didn't want to mention the name because he knows it's dirty. Courier are not a reputable polling source because they removed themselves from the only professional body in Aotearoa that deals with professional standards relating to how polling companies operate. They have like a code of conduct, they have standards. Courier were not able to meet those standards or promise to stick to those standards.
Yeah.
So they just resigned themselves from the whole thing.
Yeah.
So he's not going to now say, oh yes, it's a poll from Courier, which is also linked in with all of these other problematic people that seem to be coming up on the 6 p.m. news pretty much every day.
And are also seemingly erased from the conversation. We're going to go over it in our final story next as well. But the footprints of the Free Speech Union are always erased from the story. So like, for example, you know, when they bring in these Courier polls and center them in discussions, they don't tell you that they're coming from the Free Speech Union, which is aligned with the ACT Party. And in this case, it was actually hilarious because he was like, no, when you poll the public in a more representative type of situation, you get vast majority support for the bill. And then the reporter was like, how many people were in the poll? And he was like, 1,000 people. And the reporter was just like, okay, anyway, and just like moved on because it's just an obvious, stupid argument. 270,000 people against it out of the biggest number of submissions for a bill in history is clearly a better representative of where the public is at than some random non-officially validated polling company that's aligned with the ACT Party that only got responses from 1,000 people and included many phone calls, which, as we've talked about, is more likely to represent people that are aligned with National and ACT on these things. People who have phone calls, older people, home phones.
And I'll just address this comment from Mr. Arvid's Pere. Where do I get the shirt? Are you talking about the Pāti Māori? You offer to sit as a list MP. That's how you get
some perks.
That's how you get a t-shirt out of Te Pāti Māori. Offer to sit as a list MP.
They probably sell it on their website.
They gave me a t-shirt and a jumper. But yeah, of course, go to the Te Pāti Māori website. I'm sure you can find them on there. Otherwise, just flick them a message on Facebook or Instagram. Go bye. Last story for the night,
Last story.
Stefana Rambara.
Stephen Rainbow, someone who's openly Islamophobic, Zionist, and transphobic, was made the Human Rights Commissioner. Surprise, surprise, he's still racist and Islamophobic.
Hawkeye Mai. The Human Rights Commissioner is apologising and promising he'll do better after making comments viewed as racist and Islamophobic by members of both the Jewish and Muslim communities. Stephen Rainbow told MPs today that he'll be doing more listening and less talking from now on. Here's senior political reporter Benedict Collins.
The Human Rights Commission keeping their distance from our camera today. Their controversial boss has been reflecting on comments he made in a recent meeting about threats to the Jewish community here.
Stephen Rainbow claimed that the SIS threat assessment said that the biggest risk to the Jewish community is the Muslim community, which was rather shocking and absolutely untrue.
Those comments have caused outrage.
We were absolutely gobsmacked. We were sad, and we were thinking, really, what planet has he come from? Has he forgotten about the 51 Shahada and the single biggest massacre in New Zealand to talk about the Muslim community in those terms?
One hears racist comments from, your elderly uncle or something, but to hear it from the Human Rights Commissioner was truly shocking.
Our domestic security agency, the SIS, says at no point does their report say Muslims pose a greater threat to the Jewish community than white supremacists.
I've apologised publicly. I've apologised privately.
Saying he's sorry and he's stepped back from his views.
Philippa Yazbek, she's standing there, she felt that your comments were racist and Islamophobic. What do you say to that?
I've made an apology about any comments that I've made that have resulted in any offence.
Are you Islamophobic?
No, I am not.
The minister says he made a mistake.
He's expressed his regret for those comments and we're moving on.
You were told he wasn't suitable for the role.
He's saying, I'm sorry if anyone was offended, or he's expressed his regrets for anything that was maybe bad, that maybe but it's like, no, what you said was objectively wrong. It's not just that you need to apologize because your words upset some people. You're the Human Rights Commissioner and you're peddling misinformation. We want to know where you're getting your information from. Don't just apologize and say, oh, I'll try to do better. Why did you have that piece of propaganda in your mind, and why did you choose to spread that piece of propaganda? That's what we want to hear. Not just that, oh, sorry you got offended. Like, here, objectively, what he said is false.
Yes, he said it was from a report. That report explicitly said that white supremacists were the biggest threats. So you got something wrong. Why did you have that conception about Muslims?
Yep.
Well, there was a range of opinions on all that. I thought actually equally important was the ability to communicate ideas effectively.
The Commissioner is denying making other comments.
In terms of Afghan refugees in West Auckland, do you think they hold any particular risk in New Zealand?
I did not say the comments that were attributed to me about that.
Right.
Because a lot of those Afghan refugees put their lives on the line to keep New Zealand soldiers safe in Afghanistan. So I emphatically deny that I said that.
Geez, he definitely said that. There were multiple witnesses.
I asked him about this. He didn't deny it. In fact, more to the point, he apologised.
The Human Rights Commissioner with some fences to mend. Benedict Collins, One News.
It's...
So this is, of course, unsurprising because we all knew that he had extremely problematic views beforehand. He had tweeted transphobic things, but he's also tweeted explicitly Zionist, anti-Palestinian, Islamophobic things prior. So this doesn't come as a surprise at all.
No.
But what is most interesting about it is how he ended up in that role, because he's clearly not fit to be Human Rights Commissioner, right? And this article from Madeline Chaplin is extremely concerning, and just perfect example of corruption in this country. And again, the role that right-wing lobbyists like the Free Speech Union play in our government and low-key control our government. So get this. He applied for the job.
Right.
He didn't get shortlisted for an interview by the assessment panel. But then he got added again by Goldsmith, forced to be interviewed, and then the panel again didn't recommend him after the interview. Then he himself messaged the ACT Party Andrew Kettles to say, I didn't get the job. So he was under the impression that he didn't get the job, but then somehow ended up with the job anyway. The thing is extremely wild, and basically what it comes down to is, again, that he's just got relationships with the ACT Party. So in December 2023, he noticed that the ACT Party was facing a lot of pushback. Poor ACT. There was Toitu Te Tiriti protests, tense question lines in the House, and New Zealand First taking them over in a recent poll. And so what did he do? On December the 7th, Todd Stevenson from ACT sent out a press release attacking the current Human Rights Commission's appointment of Julia Whaipote, whom they hilariously used as an example of Māori supporting David Seymour in a One News clip where they inaccurately included her footage. Anyway, then Stephen Rainbow at some stage in December messages the ACT Party Chief of Staff, Andrew Kettles, who's also married to Jenna Lynch, a reporter on TV3 News. And he said to Andrew Kettles, Andrew, Stephen Rainbow here, the pushback you guys are facing is not unexpected but still incredible. I'm keen to help if you're needing any assistance. A gay human rights commissioner, for example, laughing emoji, Merry Christmas. So all the way back in December 2023, Stephen Rainbow plants the idea in the ACT Party Chief of Staff that he wants to be Human Rights Commissioner. Fast forward to January 23rd and
29th.
Sorry, don't know why I said 23rd. January 29th, and David Seymour nominates Stephen Rainbow to be the Human Rights Commissioner, right? And then after that nomination, as I said, the panel doesn't want him. Then Goldsmith forces an interview. The panel still doesn't want him, and then somehow he gets it anyway. And one really interesting thing about this is that it wasn't just the ACT Party that lobbied the government to bring in Stephen Rainbow, but also the Free Speech Union. Now, they put out a press release saying, we're really excited to tell you that Melissa Derby, a founding member of the Free Speech Union, just got made the Race Relations Commissioner. And then they admitted to something that they later deleted off their website, saying in December last year, around the same time that the Human Rights Commissioner was lobbying the government to be Human Rights Commissioner, he says he gave that they say, oh no, it wasn't he, it was like Jonathan Ailing that wrote this email. He said that when applicants were being considered for these roles, I gave Paul Goldsmith a call suggesting Melissa to him, whom he didn't know at the time. It was a long shot, he admits, but one that paid off. She was made race commissioner. She's, of course, a very racist founding member of the Free Speech Union. But they also say that Stephen Rainbow was appointed the new Chief Human Rights Commissioner, who's a supporter and friend of the Free Speech Union, who, in fact, was one of the first cases that the Free Speech Union took over. So, his stuff was about the conversion therapy legislation, Stephen Rainbow. Right.
So, like, just again, these worlds colliding. And, you know, it's just funny having Juliet Moses be all like, none of these things are connected. But then you realize that actually they're all connected. Yeah, very wild, but very predictable as well. Like, this is like what I was trying to say about the blue greens, you know, how they just, you know, it's trying not to put people in boxes, but often you can tell where people land on a wide range of issues just based on, you know, where they, you know, a few things. It's just, I'm not explaining it well.
It's funny because, like, I think we resist being like the right wing because it's a little bit too generic.
Right.
But day after day after day, it gets proven to us that there is such a thing as a right wing. And it's the people who align on basically oppressing marginalized communities, on oppressing Indigenous people, on supporting colonization, on believing in white supremacy and the superiority of Western culture. And yes, you can be brown and believe in the superiority of Western culture, and people need to get that through their heads.
Killed it.
Because that's the one thing about Melissa Derby is that she has whakapapa Māori, and they use that to say, oh, she can't be racist.
Right.
But obviously she freaking is racist. and does support the oppression of Māori. It's just the way it is. You either support those policies that oppress Māori or you don't, and that's what being racist is. Nothing more, nothing less. You don't have to say, I hate Māori. You don't have to say, I'm racist. I love white supremacy. Like, no one is ever going to say that in this day and age. They're just going to support policies that destroy Māori while saying, I support Māori. I love Māori. I am Māori. Oh yeah, just pointing out that he's also heavily transphobic as well. Yeah.
Could have guessed it.
And yeah, as you said, it's the same people time and time again. It's picking on whatever they think will pick up in terms of a cultural war or something that will divide our communities. It's divide and conquer. It's trying to turn us against each other, whether it's our trans and queer communities, whether it's impoverished and colonized Māori communities, whether it's immigrants or, you know, what Winston Peters calls foreigners, or whether it's Mexicans or people who wear leather jackets or people who speak about the police, so on and so forth. It's about upholding the neoliberal agenda that they're after. It's about protecting the power of the elite, wealthy people in this country. It's about protecting the allegiance with other colonial states like Israel. And I think we need to be drawing these connections even more. You know, hats off to Chloe Sporbrick for doing that. But it is just such a clear thing that these people, this very small group of lobbyists, all connected to the likes of the Free Speech Union, all connected to the Israeli lobby, all connected to Taxpayers Union and the ACT Party and National.
Wealthy donors.
All connected to wealthy donors and billionaires and the ex-wives of billionaires.
People who benefit from the status quo.
Exactly. People who benefit from the land that's been stolen from Māori. People who get paid probably by Israel to spread Israeli propaganda. And the people that have simply been brainwashed into believing into Western superiority. They are all united in the same agenda that's destroying this country. And it's just so blatantly clear because it's the same people. Like, you're not just getting a random lobbyist every now and then being like, oh, I'm raising a concern about the Greens. It's just always the same people, isn't it? It's always Annie O'Brien and Winston Peters. And
but like you say, right, they're not giving that context. And like in the news piece, that we just watched, I don't know her name, but one of the wahine on there was like, it's strange to see the Human Rights Commissioner say this. And it's like, yes, it is objectively strange that that has happened, but how did that happen?
Yes.
How did we get to the point where this guy did become the Human Rights Commissioner?
Absolutely. The lack of context. I mean, we're always talking about this, right? But the lack of context just doesn't help us understand the full situation. Because if you did explain to people that, you know, the Free Speech Union and the ACT Party lobbied for this guy, it's just, again, another piece of evidence to show that the ACT Party and the Free Speech Union has an inflated influence over our government, that they're basically controlling our government. And what's extremely concerning as well is that this guy has been put in to suppress freedom of speech. Stephen Rainbow's job and the Free Speech Union's job is to control free speech. And he says explicitly in this article, oh, maybe it's in a different article. But basically, Stephen Rainbow says that he is going to control hate speech by designating certain groups as terrorist organizations, groups in quote unquote the Middle East. So the long-term goal is to follow in the same track as the United States at the moment, of trying to criminalize support of Palestine, of trying to criminalize the criticism of Israel. And I believe this is what Stephen Rainbow's job has been. And I think he's been a little bit too outspoken in his Islamophobia, which threatens that plan because it shows their hand a little bit, doesn't it? So I think he did let it slip, his Islamophobia, because for him, you can tell that it's true in a hatred. You can tell that he genuinely believes he's not just playing the game. He's actually Islamophobic. He's actually a raging Zionist that supports Israel. You can see it in his Zionist comments. Look them up. And so, you know, when you truly believe in it like that, it just comes out. And I think it just came out with the Alternative Jewish Voices meeting that he was having. Well, he's meant to hide it a little bit better. And of course, relying on the media, hiding his prior Zionist and Islamophobic comments, hiding his prior bigoted comments towards trans people. But we know that they are on this agenda of wanting to suppress freedom of speech because he's explicitly told us that's how he's going to control.
Yeah, if you don't like
Speech.
something, you know, it's like, oh, freedom of speech, but oh, we don't like that speech, so we're going to designate it as like gang language or something like that, or, you know, supporting terrorism. And once it's designated with that, you can erase it. It's okay. You don't have to care about free speech if it's been designated, if it's been demonized, if it's from a minority group that we are allowed to push aside.
Yeah, exactly. Just trying to find that designation quote, but
Don't worry, they believe you. Everyone believes everything you say.
We brought it up in a
We've brought it up before.
in a previous thing anyway, in a previous episode. But yeah, Free Speech Union and the ACT Party lobbied for Stephen Rainbow to become a human rights commissioner, even though he's a racist, transphobic, Islamophobic Zionist. And now he is working behind the scenes to try and limit criticism of Israel. So that's what we're working up against.
It's just blatant, hey? Like you say, oh, you know, he's meant to be a bit sneakier and a bit more, you know, not meant to let the mask slip like that. But, you know, it's just the era that we're finding ourselves in, of all of these people being very blatant and very nonchalant about their fascism and their desire for further exploitation. You know, just look at Shane Jones and the drill baby drill. You know, we're in it's the energy of the anti-woke kind of thing. You know, the Donald Trump energy of just being blatantly rude, purposefully misgendering, purposefully throwing out the kind of racist comments like the send the Mexicans home, and just being blatant with that kind of thing. But, you know, we're going to see a very, very strong backswing. You know, we're seeing the pendulum at the moment swing to the right. But the harder they go, the harder it's going to swing back to us. So we need to start thinking about, you know, what are our goals going to be once this backswing comes? Because it's going to, you know, I'm predicting at the next election for probably the biggest left bloc that we've seen. I feel like it is really coming because with the Treaty Principles Bill, the energy that was around that in terms of reaching some of the spaces of our society who generally don't vote, it's been made clear now, I believe, the need for us, the importance for us to engage. And with local government elections being this year, and with the referendum taking place around Māori wards, again, we're going to be reaching out into our demographics with our campaigns around why it is relevant for our people to be voting. And we've never seen this level of engagement to get people voting, I believe. So it's going to be big.
Yeah, I agree. I managed to find that thing, and it was in that article. They say hate speech would be addressed through other means, such as making sure the terrorist groups that operate in the Middle East are prescribed organization. He says, I think if there's hateful language, but then he just argues that one of the important things is just forcing Zionists into universities, basically, which is another method that Free Speech Union attempts to force their opinions on people, is just to spend a lot of money and a lot of lobbying power to get Zionists, and including international right-wing commentators into the country, and then forcing them onto universities and other public spaces. And if these organizations don't agree to host them, they have enough money to take them to court, and so on and so forth. So that's one method, is that they simply push with a lot of money and a lot of intimidation the right-wing views. But then on the other hand, they are actually actively working at limiting what they call hate speech, but then he lets it slip that it's about prescribing certain Middle East organizations as terrorist groups in order to try and link anyone who supports those organizations as terrorist supporters, to label them as terrorist supporters, and then to try and prosecute them for that in the same way that the United States is. I predict that they will also come after immigrants in this country, people who are not quite citizens. Thank goodness I'm a citizen, folks. But you know, who knows? They come after the immigrants, the people who are on residency, on student visas first. Once they normalize that, though, they're going to do the whole denaturalization, which is removing citizenship from people. And, you know, this is what the left in the United States is trying to tell everyone. If we allow them to continue with this fascist abduction and deportation of people who simply criticize Israel in a very normal, respectful, legal way, people who protest legally, then this will come back on us. And it's just crazy, you know, that famous quote, you know, they came for so-and-so and we didn't respond, and then eventually they came for us. It's that classic thing, and we've been saying it with colonization of Palestine, for example, and saying, look, they're normalizing the most horrendous type of crimes and this is going to boomerang on us. Well, it's already happening in terms of the fascism in the United States, and still people are struggling to see how it's knocking on their doorstep. So yeah, we've got a big job ahead of us to convince people that this is directly impacting us. We know this. They're wanting to bring in Israeli technology and AI surveillance technology in prisons, for example. They're bringing in Zionists left, right, and center to try and control our policies and to limit certain freedoms of speech. So it's not exactly far-fetched, and it's something that we need to be hyper aware of. But one of the things is that they put it under the banner of free speech, you know, Free Speech Union. Yeah. And so people immediately think, I don't need to worry about suppression of free speech because it's the Free Speech Union that's talking about it.
I was just thinking about those kids who got arrested down in Aotearoa.
Oh, yes.
They were captured on university campus security cameras. These two people who they had bail conditions, I think was the situation. They weren't allowed to associate with one another, and they broke those conditions. Rebels. And then they got arrested in the night. These youngsters, right? These students arrested in the night because they breached this anti-association order. And, you know, that was through using campus security cameras.
Yeah.
You know? Like,
scary stuff.
So they are surveilling us in places that we may not expect them to, and they are using it against us. And, you know, it's signs that we are coming closer and closer to a police state where they're watching our every move and are able to pluck out whoever they want who's doing things that they don't want them to do. You know, it's to say that what's going on in America is not funneling to us. I mean, just look at the tariffs, you know what I mean? And it's just everything that's going on for me cements the fact that we really do need to be an independent country where we focus on our own self-sufficiency, you know, circular economies. We're always going to be at the beholden of what's going on overseas if we maintain all of these relationships that we are, all of these trade agreements that we are. You know, where is the corridor coming out around how we feed our own people off of our own kai? How do we work towards that type of food sovereignty, food sustainability? But no, instead, we're always talking about how we need to open up trade with other countries and how we need to be closer with other countries and we need to up our military spending and all of these things that really make no sense and keep us beholden into this globalized structure. To say that because we're you know, we're down here, Aotearoa, this little country, island nation, secluded from everyone else, but forever and always we've been, you know, a colony of the Western Empire. We're literally still, it feels, you know, we were the farm of Britain for a good while. And then, you know, we gained some forms of independence, but really based off of how our political leaders align with these incredibly egregious war crimes, such as what's going on in Palestine. It's very clear. The fact that we don't call them out, the fact that we can't use any strong independent language against them just proves how much of a slave we are to them. So whatever trajectory they go on, whatever their policies and positions are, it's going to trickle down to us unless we finally stand in our mana and demand that we be independent.
which is again another argument for Māori sovereignty, because then at least we will have one other voice when it comes to foreign policy, and what is likely to be a far more independent voice, far more rooted in values, far more united against colonization, you know. And so this is an argument we've got to make to supporters of Palestine, to the immigrant communities in this country, that if we want to shift our foreign policy, one of the best ways we can do that is actually by supporting Tino Rangatiratanga. And I just wanted to bring this up, that those two kids that were, I shouldn't say kids, but, you know, university students, rangatahi, that were abducted in the middle of the night, were actually posted about by Winston Peters. So again, it's another red flag of the increased fascistic police state that's incoming, that we can have a deputy prime minister put a target on someone's back by posting about them, and then not long afterwards they get abducted in the middle of the night. And to be clear, they weren't taken for the action that they did where they climbed the roof of a company that provides weaponry that is used for genocide. They were abducted because as a result of that action, they were given anti-association orders. We've had friends who were given those orders. Basically, they're saying you can't associate with any activists, protesters, you can't join any sort of protest. It's a very draconian enforcement. And so this was put on these guys, and the University of Canterbury collaborated with the police, gave them the surveillance footage to show that they supported just quickly setting up some chairs and interacting with people for an event that were held by those people in Peace Action o Tautahi that they're not meant to be associating with. So there's a lot of red flags here, along with the fact that they're making it really clear we can't criticize the police while they're ramping up the police state. It's just a really clear symbol that that's the path that we're going to go down. We cannot allow it. We have to draw a line in the sand and say that this is fascism. And it's funny because he called the protesters fascism, but as we've always said,
projection.
They're always projecting. They're always speaking their hearts and putting it onto us. They want to go down a path of fascism where they just absolutely shut down protests and arrest anyone they want for simply speaking out against the government. That's their hope and dream. They're taking steps to do it in the background, and we have to stand up against it.
Kia ora, kia ora. E tū, e hoa mā. Keep standing, keep standing. Just want to send another mihi to Benjamin and the whānau. Yeah, thinking of them during this time. These attacks are just going to keep coming, eh? So we really do need to wrap our support around them. Not just the Greens, Te Pāti Māori as well. Because, yeah, it really is going to keep coming. It really is. So, yeah, lots of aroha to you, Benjamin. To the Greens as well. Man, must be tiring. Must be incredibly tiring. Like, I wish they could just focus on policy, right? And maybe we should do an episode just on policy.
Yeah.
Because, you know, all of these things really are happening so that we're not talking about policy, you know, common sense policy stuff that actually makes sense, that hits the core of our issues. Those are the things that I'm sure the Greens would prefer to talk about instead of having to constantly defend themselves. But those are my closing whakaaro. Make sure we do stand up for those who are being discriminated against, people that are being bullied, you know. It's very simple, right? We need to stand up against bullying.
And in that same vein, I'm so appreciating that energy from Te Pāti Māori and the Greens at the moment of just giving the big middle finger up to these bullies, standing their ground. You know, I saw an amazing speech by Maria Meno Kapakingi talking about the removal of Section 7AA, and as usual, one ACT Party MP, it was Laura McClure, she stood up, tried to interrupt her speech, bringing up a point of order. It didn't work, but the way that Maria Meno responded, like she was like, blah, 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 and just went back to her hard-hitting speech. She didn't get bullied or intimidated into softening her language whatsoever. She called it out exactly for what it is, despite the constant attacks. And even the speaker tried to shut her down. The same with the Green Party. I love Tamitha Paul just giving nothing at all to the attacks that she's receiving. She's explained herself eloquently and clearly, but beyond that, She's maintained her stance. She's still having fun with it. She played the sound of the police at her DJ set on Cupid Duper. And you know what? The people love it. So as long as they're able to maintain their integrity and strength in the house, they will be supported by the people outside of the house. And I really think it's the winning strategy if we actually stand up to bullies, give it back to them, and just stand our ground. Don't concede anything. And by the way, Labour sucks at this. Labour sucks at this. Labour is always giving in to the right wingers. Always. Like they did with Tamitha Paul. Which, by the way, that same week, and I forgot to bring this up in my BHN interview, that same week that Labour attacked Tamitha Paul, they voted along with National for that drug testing legislation that's going to be discriminatory and incriminate more poor people, as well as give false negatives because it's just a bad drug test, as the New Zealand Drug Foundation said. So it's very clear why they're attacking the Greens. Because the Greens are attacking the policies that both Labour and National support.
Yeah, I'd love to see them actually criticise Green Party policy. I would love to see them make an argument at all. Any arguments at all. I would love to see it, but they got nothing. That's why they have to come out with these baseless, defamatory, in many cases, attacks, because they got nothing else. They got nothing.
Yeah, on policy, it's clear who's got the higher ground. And yeah, you're right. Like, we are always getting stuck in this reactive pattern.
Yep.
Always responding to their attacks. Like, I'd rather not have been talking about Benjamin Doyle's photos and posts, to be honest. There are so many bigger things happening at the moment. There are direct attacks that are killing our people, and yet we're talking about a conspiracy theory about spirals in people's bios. You know, so it's something to think about. Like, you know, are we being too responsive? Should we just ignore these stupid attacks of theirs? Or is it important that we defend our people in Parliament? I'm kind of torn, to be honest.
¿Por qué no los dos?
We'll try and do both, yeah.
Ka bye.
Bye.
Any other closing whakaaro?
That's all. E te whānau. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's been really good to chat about all the things. Loving these episodes. Thinking we should do more of them. It's really fun, and it's just good to be able to cover quite a few things in one go.
Yeah. Do hit us up with well, I mean, you know, we always like say what we're going to cover, and then we end up watching the news, and then it just like completely changes. But if we get enough recommendations from people in terms of what you might like to see us cover, we do take those suggestions on board. But more helpful, if people want to actually give us some breakdowns and maybe elucidate some clear points for us, instead of just sending us an article, you know, feel free to actually give us a little bit of a breakdown of your thinking of things.
Because a lot of you are very politically savvy.
Yeah, of course.
And are knowledgeable on topics more than us. So yeah, definitely educate us. And if you want, I mean, if you have time. But yeah, it would be appreciated and more than welcome, as well as constructive feedback, people calling us out for getting things wrong, like some people did today. Really appreciate that. Really keen to like explore things in real time and be open to making mistakes. And we said this at the very beginning as well. And just the idea of normalizing figuring things out, as long as we're open to admitting when we get things wrong.
Oh, Iceberg Slim enjoyed it. First time watcher.
Oh, yay.
For all of you who are new to our channel, just welcome. No mai haramai. Glad to have y'all here. But yeah, do send us some feedback. Like, y'all can be involved in this process because we're still, you know, figuring things out. Like, like people are saying, do a podcast with Te Pāti Māori or the Greens. Like,
keen.
We still just need to figure out, like, you know, if we have a strong enough internet connection to be able to facilitate interviews with people. Like, there are some admin stuff. But anyway, we're progressing, we're building. Hopefully in the future we'll be able to do a bit of a crowdfunding campaign so that we can actually get some like more gear. Like, a hilarious thing, we had to turn our generator on today. It's been running the whole day because we're on solar power, and it's like just ridiculously overcast at the moment. So we weren't even sure if we would be able to send this broadcast today. We need stronger internet as well. Like, so anyway, we are a work in progress, and we want to work in progress with everybody. So Never feel shy. If you ever see us at protests or out on the streets,
Yes.
no mai haramai, give us your thoughts and your whakaaro. But definitely, just in terms of the show, things that you think might be helpful, any things that you think should be covered that aren't getting covered, don't be shy. Definitely send them our way.
Ka pai.
Anything else? Or
That's
should we
all.
let class go?
Yeah, let's disperse everyone.
Ka pai. Well, enjoy the rest of your night, everyone. Have a good weekend.
It's the weekend.
Yeah, hopefully you're looking after yourself. You know, of course, it's good to do the mahi, but you gotta have some play and some enjoyment as well. We have to find joy in our lives, right? You have to. If you're feeling like you're needing something, a bit of a pickup, a bit of a refill, don't be shy from indulging in that, because the more you can fill yourself up, the more that you can help other kaupapa. And they're trying to oppress us and just smush that joy out of us, right? So the more joy that we can actually find while we continue to do this mahi, the better it's going to be for everybody. So enjoy your weekend. Thanks again for being with us tonight. Keep wrapping support around those who are being bullied by the establishment, and we'll see you in the next episode. Mauri ora.
Pāti Māori.